Chapter 246, Approaching War, You must not go out or you will simply be falling into his trap. You are not his match. Yi Mo said, this is exactly what he wants you to act rashly. Wan Qingyao was much stronger than Jiang Hua and Xiao Wuchang. And, he was much smarter as well. Yi Shiwen planned to stay low and appear only when he was strong enough to deal with the enemy. But now, Wan Qingyao's tactic was forcing Yi Shiwen to come out, and if he did, he might fall under the wind. Yi Shiwen was most disgusted from people like Wan Qingyao who used their own potential to oppress and manipulate others and could go to any extent to achieve their goals. When Wan Qingyao noticed that Yi Shiwen was not coming out no matter how much he waited, he used this seemingly innocuous method to bully and kill unrelated people and turn everyone against Yi Shiwen. Wan Qingyao had long sacrificed his moral values and no longer valued human life. That was the reason why he could come up with such a vicious method. I know. Yi Shiwen nodded and said, and I'm more afraid that if he alone can do so much damage, what if someone else joined him in his plans, then the whole situation will become even worse. For example, the 8th prince. Yi Zaiwen's fears soon became reality. Only a month later, the 8th finally made his first appearance on the Demon Island. Moreover, using his identity as the 8th prince of Great Yu State, he was leading an alliance of young geniuses of the royal clan and from Yunqing City. The Imperial Union announced a joint hunt with the Wan Tru Union to capture Yi Shiwen. Moreover, Yi Shiwen heard a rumor that Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen had fallen into the hands of the 8th prince. Yi Shiwen did not care much about the destruction of Tianfeng Union, but he cared about Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen because they were his comrades, not to mention, he was repeatedly helped by Hua Menghan. He must save them at any cost. Yi Shiwen still remained missing for another month. Wan Tru Union and Imperial Union finally made their move and openly declared that their next target would be Shuling sect. If Yi Shiwen did not appear, then they would start the raid 3 days later. The people who were familiar with the internal affairs of Great Yu State immediately understood that the 8th prince was using Wan Tru Union to eradicate the younger generation of Shuling sect. Then, he would be one step closer to his plan of dominating the Great Yu State. Everyone knew that Yi Yuan School had not produced peerless geniuses after Qi Fifan, in fact, only 3 were summoned this time. And among them, only Yi Shiwen could be considered a threat to the 8th prince's plans. The younger generation of Tianfeng Hall had already been destroyed, leaving only a few who escaped with serious injuries. Yunqing City was always a supporter of the royal clan. Now one major force was out of the picture, and this meant that the power balance of Great Yu State was now in the hands of remaining 4 major forces. The remaining 2 sects standing in the way of the 8th prince were Yi Yuan School and Shuling sect. He just needed to destroy the younger generation of these 2 sects to fulfill his goals. But even if people knew about this, there was no way to stop Wan Tru Union and Imperial Union. After all, their leaders were tyrannical experts of Truth 8th stage. Facing one expert of Truth 8th stage was asking too much, and there were 2 of them looking to kill Yi Shiwen. The rumors were that after 3 days, they would not only crush Shuling Union but also perform the public execution of Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen. If this really happened and Yi Shiwen did not show up, then one could imagine the kind of reputation he would have in the future. Moreover, this might leave a permanent scar on Yi Zaiwen's mind and hinder his further development. Even if he did not die, the lack of development potential would turn him into an average expert without courage and ambition. Afterward, he would be called a dedicated invincible expert that was wounded forever. The cold moonlight was spread over a mountain peak. A few months gone, I never thought that the 8th prince has reached the peak of Truth 8th stage, indeed fearful. Yi Shiwen was standing on the mountain peak and looking into the distance. He once defeated the 8th prince but in a same-level fight. If the battle did not take place in front of Yi Yuan School, then the 8th prince would have never agreed to have a seal placed on his level. The 8th prince was indeed a formidable opponent, and it could be said that his strength was almost comparable to that of Wan Qingyao. Yi Shiwen did not have a shred of fear, only a bit of excitement before the war. Is this 8th prince very strong? Mu Ling's voice sounded from the side. Yi Shiwen was going to face 2 major alliances and told Mu Ling, who immediately put down the practice to help his friend. Very strong. Yi Shiwen nodded. Mu Ling was surprised as he looked at Yi Shiwen. Although he did not know Yi Shiwen for a long time but knew that he never talked irresponsibly. If Yi Shiwen said that the 8th prince was very strong, then he had to be very strong. If given the chance, I want to fight him. Mu Ling's face flashed with excitement. You won't get a chance because this time, I am going to kill him. Yi Shiwen said, and a trace of firm and resolute look appeared on his face. Last time, Yi Shiwen was unable to kill him, but he wouldn't be so lucky this time. It is really a pity. Mu Ling was aware of his own strength and knew that he would not lose to anyone on the same level, but both Wan Qingyao and 8th Prince were one level above him. He really regretted that he was not at the Truth 8th stage because he wanted to fight with those two tyrannical experts. But can you really beat them? Mu Ling asked. He knew that Yi Shiwen was strong, but he could not ignore the capability of those two. Moreover, if Yi Shiwen was at Truth 8th stage, then the whole thing would have been a lot easier. But he was still at the peak of Truth 6th stage, and there was a difference of 2 levels between him and his enemies. I do not have another choice. Yi Shiwen said and spread out his hand. His whole body was instantly covered with a golden protective layer, making him look like a golden god of war. In this moment, even the moon and the stars lost their color in front of his shining golden body, as if he was the incarnation of the sun itself. He had perfected the gilded tyrant form. This whole month, Yi Shiwen naturally did not do anything else but continued to kill demon beasts and absorbed their divinities to strengthen the gilded tyrant form. The most important thing he did to complete the gilded tyrant form was to take a big risk of stealing the egg of Supreme Tyrannosaurus. He was chased for 5 days and nights by this monster of legendary realm and was almost killed several times. He was also split in half and dismembered a few times, but fortunately, he had phoenix regeneration, otherwise, he would have died back then. But the risk was worth it, since after digesting the divinity contained in the egg, he finally perfected the gilded tyrant form. After perfecting the gilded tyrant form, now, his battle efficiency was only slightly less than that of an expert of Truth 8th stage. At least now he would not need to retreat, though he could only expect a desperate fight. Your task is to pin down the experts of the 2 alliances. Leave Wan Qingyao and that 8th prince to me. Yi Shiwen said. As long as those 2 men do not interfere, even the experts of Shuling Union can take care of the other experts. I will prefer to lend you a hand. Mu Ling said, and was willing to remain at his friend's side no matter where the path would take them. No. Yi Shiwen shook his head. Now on the Demon Island, perhaps only I can kill them both. If I cannot do it, then no one can. Yi Shiwen was so confident because he could feel the sudden power surge within his body after perfecting the gilded tyrant form. He did not suspect Mu Ling's ability. If he was an expert of Truth 8th stage, then he would not be inferior to them. Now we must prepare for the upcoming war. Yi Shiwen said. He wanted to cultivate Jin Yuan for the next 3 days to restore his strength. The Supreme Tyrannosaurus was too fearful and injured him so badly and so many times that his vitality was hurt in the process. Even with Phoenix regeneration, it would take time to regenerate his lost vitality. Although his battle efficiency would not suffer with the loss of vitality, but his endurance would suffer considerably. Thankfully, 3 days were enough to cultivate vitality with the help of Phoenix regeneration. 3 days passed quickly and the raid finally began on the Shuling Union. Chapter 247 Battle with the 2 tyrants. In the early morning, the Imperial Union and the Wan Tru Union arrived at the encampment of Shuling Union to begin the punitive expedition. In addition, almost 1,000 other disciples also came to observe the battle. The 8th prince was standing in midair. Clad in a royal robe, he looked like an absolute tyrant who seemed all prepared to dominate the entire world. Right now, he was looking indifferently towards the members of Shuling Union. In his opinion, these people were actually the rebels and he must either tame them or eradicate them. Wan Qingyao was standing at his side and looked even more vicious, as if he was not looking at humans but ants. Yi Shiwen, come out to die. The 8th prince coldly said and glanced towards the crowd of experts that had come to observe, as if to recognize Yi Ziwen's face. At this time, Wan Qingyao said, let's begin. If he doesn't want to come out, we will compel him to come out. Attack! The eighth prince issued the command and disciples of the two alliances rushed towards the disciples of Shuling Union to exterminate them. The disciples of Imperial Union mostly consisted of imperial guards who were trained to eradicate any and all obstacles from the path of the eighth prince. Boom! 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 Suddenly, there came noise of intermittent fearful explosions, and those disciples who crashed in the encampment found themselves trapped inside a scarlet-colored Jin array. They were now firmly surrounded from all sides. Some disciples screamed pitifully and their bodies disintegrated on the spot. The spilled blood was directly absorbed by the array and took the shape of an evil blood god. It curled up the corners of its mouth to reveal an evil grin, and a blood-red spear appeared in its hand. The evil blood god threw the spear that branched out into numerous spears and instantly nailed several disciples to the ground. Not good, we fell into their trap. A disciple shouted in panic. At this time, the eighth prince's complexion slightly changed as he said, damn, this is Shuling Union's trap. Mu Yuran. The eighth prince clenched his teeth. Did you think that the Shuling Union will just sit back and do nothing? A strange voice sounded from the direction of Shuling Union's encampment and a blood-red figure flew out of there. I will terminate your followers. Your dream of world domination can go to hell. The young man in a blood-red robe with somewhat pale complexion said in a cold voice as he viciously stared at the enemy. It was Mu Yuran, the super geniuses from the younger generation of Shuling sect. You are courting death, you must blame Yi Shiwen for this. You are suffering because he did not show up. The eighth prince gritted his teeth and shouted. You think you can deceive me? Mu Yuran said disdainfully, this low-level trick doesn't fool me. Give up on your whole brainwash plan and don't even bother acting friendly. No need to talk nonsense with him, I will break this array right away. Wan Qingyao could not see his men getting killed in front of his eyes. I am already here. Are you blind or something, cannot see me? A cold voice resounded throughout the sky and a huge blade light suddenly swept towards Wan Qingyao. Wan Qingyao sneered and his hands spread out to form a layer of divine light that instantly annihilated the blade light. Yi Shiwen, you finally came to meet your death? The eighth prince said and a crazed look appeared in his eyes. I give him to you. Wan Qingyao looked at the eighth prince and said, then advanced toward the Shuling array. Boom! Yi Shiwen shot his palm. A giant golden dragon flew towards Wan Qingyao and blocked his path. Did I say you can go? Yi Shiwen indifferently said. At this time, Mu Ling vanished from the side of Yi Shiwen and appeared in front of Yunqing City's top genius named Jian Wuchen. You showed up today and made the biggest mistake of your life. I'll never let you run away again. The eighth prince ferociously said. You are quite the tactician, aren't you? Yi Shiwen smirked and said, you use me as a reason to eradicate your competitors. That's really a good plan. So long as I can kill you, I don't mind going to any limits. The eighth prince's face revealed an evil smile. Kill me? You really do like to joke around, don't you? Did you forget how I nailed you to the ground like a dead dog? If that old guy hadn't come to save your sorry ass, I would have tortured you to death. Well, I'd like to see who is going to save you today. Yi Shiwen smiled, but each and every word that came out of his mouth hit the bullseye. Your elder sealed my power, otherwise, I would have defeated you easily. But today, I will use my full power to kill you. The eighth prince's heart was instantly filled with monstrous rage and ferocity. He was confident because today he could display his full power, and after obtaining the heritage of four sacred beasts sect, his power and skill had progressed by leaps and bounds. He completely forgot the fact that in the last duel, Yi Shiwen used to at the peak of truth 4th stage, and even after his own level was sealed, he was still at small truth level. I wanted the eighth prince to deal with you, but since you are so eager to die, I will first kill you. Wan Qingyao coldly glared at the man who slaughtered his two deputy chiefs. An invincible imposing aura burst out of his body as if he was the true supreme existence in this world. The 8th prince's imposing aura also broke out. He was truly worthy of his reputation. And from the wretched expression on his face, one could see that he would resort to all means as long as they served his purpose. Not to mention, he planned to team up with Wan Qingyao to slaughter Yi Shiwen. If you think you can stop us and allow Shuling guys to kill our men, you're too naive. I can radically kill you with a flick of my hand. Wan Qingyao sneered. Then why don't you try? Yi Shiwen was not in a hurry because this was the time for the enemy to be anxious. With passing time, their men were getting slaughtered inside the Shuling array. The spectators were shocked because they clearly saw that Yi Shiwen had little to no chance of winning. Battling two experts of Truth 8th Peak simultaneously was simply insane. Is he insane? How does he plan to fight those two? I think he is trying to stall for time so that the large array of Shuling Union can sweep clean the disciples of the two major alliances. Everyone was aware of the fearfulness of those two tyrants, and one would need boundless courage and willpower to face both of them simultaneously. I don't think so. At this time, Warhawk crossed his hands behind the back and solemnly said, I sense heavy murderous aura from Yi Shiwen. He actually plans to kill them. The surrounding disciples were left stunned when they heard this. According to them, fighting even one was insane, but according to Warhawk, Yi Shiwen was all set to kill both? Was such a thing really possible? These two tyrants were existences of Truth 8th Peak. The news about Yi Ziwen's battle with those two was enough to attract this island celebrities like Warhawk, Ji Moon, and Wang Purple to come here to watch the battle. Wan Qingyao waved his blade and a dazzling long blade light went across the sky towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen did not reveal any expression on his face, just instantly covered his whole body with a layer of Zhen Yuan and golden divinity. Then, the long blade danced in his hand and shot a fluctuating blade light to welcome the incoming attack. ZZ. ZZ. Boom. Two blade lights collided and mutually devoured each other, setting off endless blast waves in all directions. The surrounding forest was directly wiped out by the aftermath of this blast. A grim smile appeared on the 8th prince's face as he took out his spear and shot terrifying spear shadows towards Yi Shiwen. Shua! Yi Shiwen waved his long blade horizontally and blocked this peerless spear attack. The battle has started. Some people exclaimed. Yi Shiwen was showing no signs of falling under the wind, even if he was facing attacks from the two tyrant experts. This made people feel as if their heads would explode with bafflement. What the hell was going on? However, there were many people who thought that Yi Shiwen should not fall under the wind from the beginning. After all, if that happened, then there was no point in coming to observe this battle. Although people thought that Yi Shiwen was audacious, but no one thought of him as an idiot. Right when the 8th prince's spear attack was blocked by Yi Shiwen, Wan Qingyao instantly released a much larger blade light than before. As Yi Shiwen expected, these two tyrants seemed to be in a hurry and wanted to finish this fight as quickly as possible. After all, if their elite men were exterminated inside the Shuling array, then what would happen to their aggressive dominance? The two tyrants would end up being loners on this island. Boom! After a terrifying collision, both sides continually withdrew several steps. Yi Ziwen's gilded tyrant body was vibrating right now. Its defense was truly tyrannical, but Yi Ziwen's level was not enough to simultaneously deal with two experts from two levels above. In fact, the two tyrants were shocked to no limit, especially the 8th prince. His eyes were full of disbelief because he never expected that Yi Shiwen would display such a progress. He got the heritage of 4 sacred beasts and managed to reach the peak of Truth 8th stage so quickly, but what kind of heritage Yi Shiwen obtained to progress so fast, and that too at such a young age? It was obvious that Yi Shiwen really defeated him when it came to cultivation progress speed. Die! Thinking of this, an endless killing intention spread in the 8th prince's bloodshot eyes. Chapter 248, Fight with Fate. Mu Ling was facing Jian Wuchang. Jian Wuchang had a dignified appearance, although he was clad in simple attire and his face had an indifferent expression, but no one would dare to underestimate him. He had an absolute heroic aura. Get out of the way. Jian Wuchen was a man of few words and did not have any favorable impression of the 8th prince, but being a disciple of Yunqing City, he had no other choice. He received the order from an elder of his sect to follow the 8th prince's commands. Yi Shuan also glanced at his opponents and did not give the slightest indication of losing this battle. If he was defeated, then who would save the disciples of Shuling Union? After all, they were using up their entire strength in maintaining such a massive array. Impossible. Mu Ling said and shot a glance at Yi Shuan. But he was relieved to see that Yi Shuan had not fallen under the wind. Jian Wuchen did not want to fight, but since Mu Ling was not ready to step aside, he had no choice but to engage in battle. He instantly waved his sword and released a rippling sword key that went across the sky, churning the clouds all the way, and descended upon Mu Ling. Jian Wuchen did not hesitate from using one of his best attacks on Mu Ling. Meanwhile, Mu Ling also did not hold back and displayed his best sword skill. Since his practice was based on consumption of dead qi, his sword attack was bound to be gloomy and ghastly. The whole sky as if trembled when these two sword attacks collided and set off storms in all directions. The spectators trembled when the strong auras of these two sword geniuses spread everywhere. Though their battle was not as outstanding as the battle between Yi Shuan and the two tyrants, but there was not much difference either. After all, they were just one stage below. There were only a few experts of Truth's 7th stage on the Demon Island, so no one would dare to look down on them. Boom! Two massive streams of sword qi severely collided and set off waves of a hellish aura in the surroundings. Jian Wuchen was a rare sword genius that appeared once in a century, but Mu Ling was also an unusual expert and his powers were derived directly from hell. Suddenly, there appeared two diagrams in the sky, each representing the practiced sword intention of the two sword geniuses. It could be seen that both sword intentions were at the acme level, and as soon as they collided, they began to devour each other and resulted in a fearful competition between their respective ideal conditions. Boom! 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 The intensity of this battle was obviously inferior to the battle going on between Yi Shuan and the two tyrants. Jian Wuchen's main motive was to save his fellow disciples of Yunqing City who were trapped inside the Shuling array, but Mu Ling promised Yi Shuan that he would absolutely not allow anyone to pass. Aaa. 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 Inside the Shuling array, the evil blood god's spears were nailing the experts on the ground one by one. Mu Yuran was smiling and seemed very happy. He felt proud and elated while the disciples of the Imperial Union and the Wan Tru Union were crying pitifully. Almost everyone thought that this was going to be the end of Shuling sect's younger generation. After all, why would Yi Shuan show up and risk his life for the sake of some strangers? And even if he did, the 8th prince would not put a hold on his plan of getting rid of Shuling sect's younger generation. There was an evil smile on Mu Yuran's face, because after this battle, who would dare to underestimate the Shuling Union? Boom! The 8th princes shot a glorious spurky which as if pierced through the sky and was firmly locked on Yi Shuan. Clang! Wan Qingyao's blade instantly released a dazzling blade light that went howling towards Yi Shuan. Two scary attacks were rushing towards Yi Shuan and everyone thought that he could certainly not withstand them. In fact, withstanding even one would be a miracle, let alone two. The earth-shattering attacks bulldozed numerous trees and set off air explosions everywhere. Boom! Yi Zaiwen's long blade congealed a huge dragon that immediately rushed out. A terrible blast swept off after the collision, but Yi Shuan did not move one bit. The aftermath and complementary waves of this world-shattering collision did not affect him at all. His incomparably tyrannical golden body was simply not budged by anything and he continued to stand right where he was, with peerless self-confidence. Get out of the way. Compared to the 8th prince, Wan Qingyao was much more concerned about his men and did not want them to die. There was a surge of dreadful energy that completely erupted from his body all of a sudden and rushed towards Yi Shuan like a sea of moving mountains of light. The Bladiki was rushing towards Yi Shuan like surging waves of the sea, and at this time, the 8th prince also shot a deadly spear attack that released a dragon. It seemed as if a dragon was lurking in the waves, sometimes soaring up, sometimes diving in the waves. This scene was exceptionally awe-inspiring. Yi Zaiwen's eyes revealed intense killing intention, aimed at both of these tyrants. If Wan Qingyao's bladiki was like waves of the sea, then Yi Zaiwen's bladiki was sharp enough to cleave those waves. Yi Shiwen was able to sweep away any attack aimed at him, regardless of how vast and massive those attacks might be. At this time, the tyrannical might of gilded tyrant form fully manifested and golden Jin Yuan started to boil within Yi Zaiwen's body. He appeared like a golden god of war, standing motionless in the raging waves of bladiki like an iron mountain. No matter how mighty those waves might be, were unable to move him even a step back. Yi Shiwen knew that this was not yet the most tragic phase of the battle. But his gilded tyrant form had also not been fully released either. He is really fighting with two tyrannical experts and is not pressed under the wind. Indeed, how is he able to block their joint attacks? This Yi Shiwen is too weird. Even if he dies today, he will still become a legend. It's still early to make such speculations. Warhawk said while observing the battle from sidelines, this is just the beginning, and it's hard to say which side will come out as victorious. Ji Moon Ji and Wang Purple nodded. Their visions were naturally not like ordinary people. The Great Yu State has given a lot of elites to this world. The Eighth Prince, Yi Shiwen and Mu Yuran are all peerless elites. Warhawk said because it was not hidden from him that almost 100 experts were summoned from Great Yu State. Yi Yuan School was famous for the shortage of elites in their younger generation, but Yi Shiwen alone was more than enough to compensate. The battle suddenly entered into the most intense phase. Yi Zaiwen's long blade released a sword intention that was faintly glowing with fluctuating world laws. Yi Shiwen was slowly revealing his cards. Now, each and every one of his blade attacks transformed into ruthless sword intention and also contained the ideal condition practiced by him to the acme level. Clang! Boom! An enormous sword intention rushed across the sky and advanced towards the two tyrants. The Eighth Prince and Wan Qingyao also resorted to their strongest attacks. Wan Qingyao's blade released endless waves of bladiki that seemed to be burdening the entire world. The Eighth Prince's spear also released an endless barrage of spurki. Boom! The blast swept out in all directions. Even the atoms cracked open in this terrible collision that formed a blossoming mushroom cloud rising into the sky. Yi Zaiwen's hair was flying crazily in the wind. He did not stop even for a second and immediately waved his long blade, releasing a fearful blade light that went across the sky and collided with the enemy's joint attack. Boom! 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 The aftermath of the explosion crushed everything in the surroundings, sweeping away mountain peaks and the forest. Even the universe seemed to be collapsing in its wake. The two sides once again indulged in a superheated battle. Everyone's eyes were dazzled by this scene. They never expected to see such an intense battle. In fact, even the experts of Truth 8th stage would call the level of this battle extremely tyrannical. This was a rare opportunity to witness such a battle, and if lost, then might not get another one. The battle was finally arriving in its most tragic phase. Shwa! Yi Zaiwen's long blade clashed with the Eighth Prince's spear and the terrifying rippling energy waves swept towards a mountain peak and smashed it to pieces. But, at this time, the suppression world law attached at the tip of the spear swept forward and pierced into Yi Zaiwen's body. Puchi! His golden blood splashed out and he quickly went several steps back to avoid the next section of this attack. He is finally injured. Is this it? Is this the end of his fight with the fate? A disciple shouted excitedly. The Eighth Prince roared and his tall body pressed down towards Yi Shiwen like a boundless mountain. This was the right moment to end this battle. He saw an opening in Yi Zaiwen's defenses and must make the final strike immediately to finish him off once and forever. You will die. No one is going to save you today. The Eighth Prince sneered and swept his spear, setting off a terrible storm that transformed into a mass of light and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 249, The Eighth Prince nailed to the ground, you will die. No one is going to save you today. The eighth prince sneered and swept his spear, setting off a terrible storm that transformed into a mass of light and rushed towards Yishiwen. If Gilded Tyrant form's defense was not truly tyrannical, then Yishiwen would have already been defeated a long time ago. The spear thrust forward like a dragon, directly towards Yishiwen. Puchi! The eighth prince's spear accurately pierced through the belly of Yishiwen. Yishiwen spat a mouthful of blood, and the blood also oozed out of the wound on his belly. This battle had already resulted in the destruction of the surrounding forest. Yishiwen immediately grabbed the spear with his hands, and the Gilded Tyrant form activated to its extreme. Yizaiwen's might was so greatly strengthened that the eighth prince never expected that he would not be able to pull out the spear from his body. While still clutching the spear with his hands, a spiraling golden energy surged out of his body and transformed into a huge dragon. It soared into the sky and instantly crashed into the eighth prince's body. Bang! The eighth prince was instantly sent flying. This attack was so terrifying that some of the bones in his body were broken and he suddenly spouted a mouthful of blood. This was the so-called method of getting mutually wounded, where both of them were injured almost at the same time. But, there appeared a look of terror in the eyes of the eighth prince when he saw Yizaiwen's injuries healing at an unimaginable speed. In a flash, Yizaiwen's body was restored to its original state and there were no traces of wounds anywhere on his body. Not just the eighth prince, everyone present on the scene was dumbfounded. They saw that Yizaiwen's battle efficiency was also restored to its peak level. Only Gilded Tyrant form was not enough to give him confidence that he could kill those two simultaneously. The main source of his confidence was the Phoenix regeneration technique. Yishiwen's combat effectiveness was not inferior to them, and so long as he continued to recover unceasingly, he would be able to kill both of them sooner or later. This was the only method capable of beheading both of them at the same time. If Yishiwen did not succeed this time, then it would be even more difficult the next time. Yishiwen did not want to fall short, and his present tactic was trading wound for wound. The fast regeneration ability of the Phoenix regeneration technique gave him such confidence. There was another way to exhaust them to death, although it would possibly hurt Yizaiwen's vitality and shorten his lifespan, but right now, he had no choice. He must get rid of the eighth prince and Wan Qingyao, otherwise it would be disastrous if Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen fell into their hands. Earlier, he had heard false rumor of them falling into the hands of the enemy, but it might become a tragic reality. This needed to be done today. Yishiwen did not have the luxury of trying next time. Not to mention, he was aware of Wan Qingyao's mentality. He was even worse than the eighth prince, since no moral barriers could stop him from sinning if he felt offended. He would continue to wreak havoc throughout the island and must be exterminated today. Saving the world from these two psychos was worth losing some of his lifespan. If he was at Truth's 7th stage, then killing these tyrants would be a lot easier. Yishiwen showed no hesitation and rushed straight towards Wan Qingyao. Boom! Yizaiwen's long blade went towards Wan Qingyao's body. The blade light released from the long blade invoked suppression law of the world and as if moved forward to crush the universe. Yishiwen had added divinity to the Bladiki, and that was the reason why the whole world shook in the presence of this divine attack. Shatter! Wan Qingyao's blade released a large stream of blade light towards the incoming attack. Shwa! The horrifying collision turned numerous trees into ashes, and Wan Qingyao's felt his hands go numb all of a sudden. He cursed in his heart and did not know what kind of strange power was being used by Yishiwen, but his attacks contained extreme might, the force of hundreds of millions of jin, as if released to chop down the stars in the sky. Missing Moon Beheader. Yizaiwen's first blade attack had not even stagnated when he made the second blade attack the very next moment. Boom! Another blade attack fiercely pounded on Wan Qingyao's blade, and the terrifying force contained in it shook him thoroughly. Boom! The third blade attack instantly changed its direction and sliced its way into Wan Qingyao's body. He suddenly spat a mouthful of blood and was extremely depressed in his heart. Yizaiwen's blade skill was too weird because he caught the opportunity and made 3 blade attacks one after another, and each attack was mightier than the previous one. This blade skill was called Missing Moon Beheader, and its key point was to find an opening in the opponent's defenses. As soon as there was an opening, the practitioner could use his strongest blade attack. And while waiting for an opening, the practitioner could continue to use blade attacks one after another to keep the opponent busy while constantly increasing the might of the attacks to confuse the opponent, going all the way up to the 9th blade attack. Of course, the 9th blade attack would contain an earth-shattering might, much more than the might of the previous blade attacks. However, Wan Qingyao was a skilled fighter and he immediately dodged the next blade attack to get out the barrage of blade attacks coming one after another. He dodged the 4th blade attack and did not know that the 6th blade attack might have ended his life. Ordinary experts were unable to display the full might of Missing Moon Beheader, but in the hands of Yi Shiwen, who was a peerless blade master and had comprehended the ideal condition of this technique, it was truly frightening. Wan Qingyao quickly retreated far away from Yi Shiwen, but at this time, the 8th prince suddenly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. The spectators were afraid to blink because they might miss something important. They were not just watching the battle but also observing the skills used by these 3 tyrannical experts and learning new things. Now, they knew that their assumptions were wrong. Instead of falling under the wind, Yi Shiwen actually had the upper hand, of course, only when he was fighting one opponent at a time. Not to mention, none of the 2 tyrants was a match of Yi Shiwen in Aoneon one fight. However, whenever the 8th prince and Wan Qingyao teamed up, Yi Shiwen was forced to switch to defense-styled combat. At this time, Wan Qingyao was feeling an uncontrollable rage surging in his heart. It was a shame for him that in spite of being at truth 8th peak, he was pushed to such an extent by an expert that was 2 levels below him. If the 8th prince did not lend a hand then. Wan Qingyao's anger-filled roars resounded throughout the sky and the air began to boil like boiling water. Countless air explosions took place in the sky and it seemed as if the surrounding space would crack open any time. Wan Qingyao was releasing a terrifying imposing aura and some spectators felt as if their eardrums would shatter any moment now. Wan Qingyao went all out and his fearful imposing aura instantly locked on Yi Shiwen. He did not waste time and immediately shot a rippling blade light that rushed towards Yi Shiwen at a lightning-fast speed. Boom! Yi Shiwen tried to block this attack but was sent flying and his ribs were completely shattered. Yi Shiwen felt an intense pain raiding his brain. World domination. The 8th prince did not miss this chance and directly impaled Yi Shiwen with his spear. Boom! Yi Shiwen was directly nailed to the ground. Seeing Yi Shiwen in this state, the 8th prince laughed and a grim look appeared on his face. Last time, he was nailed to the ground and that brought a lifelong shame for him, but he took revenge today by doing the same to Yi Shiwen. However, his pleased mood did not last long because Yi Shiwen suddenly shot his palm, releasing a mass of spiraling energy that pounded on his chest and sent him flying. He paid the price for being arrogant and underestimating Yi Shiwen and also letting his guard down. He spurted a mouthful of blood and fell heavily on the ground. Yi Shiwen pulled out the spear from his body and his wounds healed almost instantaneously. The experts who saw this scene held their breaths and simply did not believe their eyes. How was this possible? How could he have such an ability which simply defied the heavens' will? Most importantly, was it literally impossible to kill Yi Shiwen? No wonder he was so full of confidence and challenged these 2 tyrannical experts. Yi Shiwen's hands were instantly enveloped by a kind of seething golden energy. Whoosh! An awful piercing sound echoed throughout the sky when Yi Shiwen threw the spear towards the 8th prince, who was still lying on the ground. Boom! The spear descended upon the 8th prince and nailed him to the ground. Yi Shiwen was quite far away and did not know what kind of expression appeared on his face right now. Perhaps, he was excited to be nailed to the ground by his own spear. In fact, the 8th prince's face was flushed red with shame and embarrassment. After all, this was the 2nd time he was nailed to the ground by Yi Shiwen. Not to mention, he did not have the Phoenix regeneration technique to heal his wounds. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen did not get a chance to give the finishing blow to the 8th prince because Wan Qingyao immediately appeared in front of him. The atmosphere began to disintegrate when these 2 collided and several experts trembled with fear and excitement. If they had not seen this battle from the beginning, they would have continued to think that Yi Shiwen was just an expert of Truth's 6th peak and his battle efficiency was comparable to the experts of Truth's 7th peak. But, now they knew that there was no one on this island that could be his rival. The long blade danced in Yi Shiwen's hands. A huge dragon roared and flew into the sky, and it seemed like its fierce claws would tear the sky to shreds. Chapter 250, Frightened. The long blade danced in Yi Shiwen's hands. A huge dragon roared and flew into the sky, and it seemed like its fierce claws would tear the sky to shreds. Boom! A fearsome blast engulfed the sky and instantly formed a tornado so massive that the spectators felt as if they would be sucked into it, even though they were observing from afar. Wan Qingyao's blade light gave rise to chaos in the sky and arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. With a flick of his hand, Yi Shiwen diverted the trajectory of the blade light. The two tyrannical experts then engaged in a terrible battle, and none of them seemed to hold back. They were no longer using complex martial techniques to show off their skills, rather they were now resorting to make use of brute force and inherent energy. Wan Qingyao was relying on his higher level, while Yi Shiwen was relying on gilded tyrant form and phoenix regeneration technique to sustain such a world-shattering battle. The spectators felt as if the battle potential of these two experts was enough to cause the end of this world. They were nothing like the mediocre experts from their respective levels. One could see that whether it was Wan Qingyao, Yi Shiwen, the 8th prince, Warhawk, or the remaining two super experts, all of them were basically outstanding experts even among the group of peerless geniuses summoned to this island. In a few years, they would surely be sitting at the top of not just their own generation, but a generation above them. Moreover, a clash between them was bound to happen sooner or later. Initially, everyone thought that Yi Shiwen didn't belong among these tyrannical experts and would certainly die, but now they did not think so. Yi Shiwen had already shown enough strength to stand among them. Yi Shiwen did not fall under the wind even while facing those two tyrants at the same time. What else did they need as a proof of his tyrannical strength? Yi Shiwen's performance was not just strong, he actually managed to injure both Wan Qingyao and the 8th prince. And judging from the battle, they could clearly see that in a one-on-one battle, Yi Shiwen was superior to both of them. In fact, even Warhawk would have been unable to perform this well if he was the one battling these two tyrants. Therefore, it was obvious that no one on this island could alone beat Yi Shiwen, not to mention it seemed literally impossible to kill him since he had some kind of mystical regeneration technique that defied the heavens. Yi Shiwen was confident that he could kill them both, and also knew that even if the super experts teamed up to fight against these two tyrants, might not be able to defeat them. No wonder the super experts did not dare to participate in this battle even if they wanted to and were just watching from sidelines. He and only he could do this. And he must do this. Of course, if Yi Shiwen was at Truth 8th stage, then this battle would have ended in the very beginning. Then, Yi Shiwen would be so powerful that if he desired, he could single-handedly wipe out each and every expert from the face of this island. What happened? Was it not you who wanted me to come out? Yi Shiwen said in a cold voice, "See, I came out to test your skill, but it seems like a waste of time." Yi Shiwen completely released his terrifying aura and appeared just like a god in the sky. The divinity was crawling all over his body and the look in his eyes was extremely cold, as if a god of destruction was looking at his prey. In Yi Shiwen's godlike presence, everyone looked no different than ant-like existences. Yi Shiwen decided not to wait any longer and took advantage of the 8th prince being presently nailed to the ground. He launched a full-scale attack to kill Wan Qingyao in one fell swoop. Otherwise, going on like this was not favorable for him. The Phoenix regeneration technique was not completely invincible and involved large energy consumption. He was still at the peak of Truth 6th stage, and the ratio of consumption was certainly large in comparison to that of an expert of Truth 8th stage. Yi Shiwen looked just like a god to everyone present on the scene. His whole body was covered with endless divinity and exuding fearful rays of golden light in all directions. At this time, he looked like a being who could subjugate anyone in the 10,000 worlds. Wan Qingyao looked at the godlike being standing in the sky and understood that he must immediately release all his power, otherwise he would not be able to survive the next attack. He was curious to know the secret of Yi Zaiwen's strange power but was scared of death. This was the first time he was scared of losing his life. However, Wan Qingyao was an arrogant guy. He was destined to become one of the leaders of the southeast region and rule above countless people. He also completely released his power and shot his mightiest blade light towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen used his long blade to first block this blade light, then instantly congealed the invincible might of gilded tyrant form in his palms and tore that blade light to shreds. The spectators felt as if they were transported to the prehistoric era and were watching a battle between two war gods. It was like a battle between a golden martial god and a devil. One of the two was instantly regenerating his severed body parts, while the other was totally ignoring his severe injuries. Not to mention, their prestige was on the line, so the rest of the world could just meet the doom. They couldn't care less and were fully indulged in this frenzy. On the one hand, Wan Qingyao looked crazier with a crazed look flashing in his bloodshot eyes and was putting everything on the line to get rid of Yi Zaiwen, while on the other hand, Yi Shiwen looked calm and composed and his golden eyes were focused on the prey. The golden divinity not only granted him a tyrannical body but also influenced his perception and charisma. Right now, anyone would say without hesitation that Yi Shiwen was much more powerful than Wan Qingyao. I can dominate people, I can manipulate anyone. I am a supreme being who was born to rule. You are nothing in front of me. Wan Qingyao roared with rage. The Wan True Union was just a way to prove his dominance to the younger generation of the 10 countries of the southeast region. It was just the first step towards dominating the entire southeast region by subjugating these peerless geniuses of the younger generation. Then, within few hundred years, he might become a huge presence, far above the reach of the 10 countries of southeast region. It could be said that his ambition was far ahead of the ambition of the 8th prince. However, just when he was going to be successful in the most critical step, he had to face an obstacle like Yi Shiwen. And before his ambition could take a real form, it was basically crippled by Yi Shiwen. He was so angry right now that he not only wanted to chop down Yi Shiwen into pieces, but also wanted to annihilate his soul so that he would never be able to reincarnate. Wan Qingyao's imposing aura was increasing crazily, fueled by his rage, and it eventually became almost comparable to Yi Zaiwen's divine aura. You actually think that someone like you can dominate people? Yi Shiwen sneered, how foolish can you be? You think strength is enough to dominate people? I don't even feel like educating you on the topic. Anyway, it's going to be a waste of time to educate a dead man. Yi Shiwen finally understood why Wan Qingyao and that 8th prince had teamed up. There was a popular saying in his past life, birds of a feather flock together. These two were ambitious fools who wanted to dominate people with sheer power. Well, they were not completely mistaken about the basic concept of domination, since this world was governed by strength, but Yi Shiwen was not someone from this world. He was certainly not someone who would allow someone, certainly not such idiots, to dominate him. Boom! Yi Shiwen instantly rushed forward like a missile and his terrifying speed caused sonic booms. Horrifying. The experts could not help but praise Yi Zaiwen's power. They had to move far back to stay away from the aftermath of the supersonic waves. Aye! Save us! Aye! The pitiful screams transmitting from within the Shuling array gradually disappeared. One by one, all of the trapped disciples had been nailed to the ground. Mu Yuran was standing on the side and his face looked extremely pale and covered in sweat. One could imagine the consumption of Zhen Yuan for maintaining such a massive array. At this time, he was literally out of energy but didn't seem worried because almost all of the enemy disciples were now dead. After hearing the last screams of a few surviving members of his alliance, Wan Qingyao got even angrier and attacked Yi Shiwen. Die! A war cry thundered in the sky and Yi Shiwen dived towards Wan Qingyao like a god descending to the earth. His hands transformed into 2 coiling dragons and swept out to crush the world. The whole world rippled as if suppressed by the 2 mighty dragons. Yi Zaiwen's fearful imposing aura was suffocating Wan Qingyao, but his complexion appeared grimmer than that of the 8th prince. Both experts once again engaged in a superheated battle, almost disregarding their own safety by using most of their energy reserves in the attacks. Wan Qingyao waved his blade and released a fearful bladiki mixed with his imposing aura. Yi Shiwen again tore the mass of bladiki with his bare hands. He had already removed the limiter and fully unleashed gilded tyrant form at the cost of fast consumption of Jin Yuan. He was all prepared to end this battle very soon. The spectators felt their hearts almost jumping out of their mouths. Perhaps this was the most tyrannical battle to take place on this island so far. Puchi. Wan Qingyao's blade suddenly opened a huge wound on Yi Zaiwen's golden body. However, at this moment, he was unable to dodge in time and suffered a punch on his chest that instantly made a dent on his solid chest. He spurted a mouthful of blood and was sent flying far away. Yi Zaiwen's wound healed instantly and he rushed towards Wan Qingyao and once again thrust his palm. Yi Shiwen had abandoned complex moves and was focusing on most primitive moves. Each time Yi Shiwen was injured by Wan Qingyao, the counterattack would also cause him injuries. However, Yi Zaiwen's instant healing ability was constantly crushing the morale of Wan Qingyao. Wan Qingyao felt like vomiting blood when he saw that all his efforts were basically useless. Yi Zaiwen's golden body was spotless without a single scratch anywhere. Wan Qingyao was not a fool and even he could see that his own attacks, if not powerful enough, were not able to injure Yi Zaiwen's golden body. And whenever he put extra energy and effort to strengthen his attack to injure Yi Shiwen, he would face a counterattack from Yi Shiwen at the same time, making the whole thing counterproductive since Yi Shiwen was somehow able to heal his own wounds instantly. Yi Shiwen was defying common sense and his battle strategy was flawless. Wan Qingyao's rage was nowhere to be seen, in fact, it was now replaced by fear and frustration. Perhaps, no one in the crowd of spectators was capable enough to block Wan Qingyao's attacks, but even such attacks were useless in front of Yi Zaiwen's flawless battle strategy. Wan Qingyao had already lost the confidence of winning. He was scared to attack Yi Shiwen, thinking that the next counterattack might end his own life. He could neither run away nor attack. Of course, he certainly could not stand idly and think. Your tyranny ends here and now. Yi Shiwen sneered and rushed forward. Ah! From a distant place, the eighth prince suddenly began to shout and his spear also began to emit rays of horrifying light. He was holding his spear and trying to pull it out of his body to break free and immediately rushed to rescue Wan Qingyao. Wan Qingyao's face revealed a look of pleasant surprise. He thought that he must survive until the eighth prince would break free, then both of them would team up to kill Yi Shiwen. Perhaps, he still had not noticed that he was thinking like a coward and had already lost the battle of wits. He had fallen into the well-planned trap of Yi Shiwen. Right now, he was scared and had also lost confidence. He could not even contemplate a scenario of alone defeating Yi Shiwen. He was subconsciously depending on the eighth prince's help and this thought process was surely going to bring his doom. His invincible courage and confidence had been thoroughly crushed by Yi Shiwen. He was no longer a tyrant whose ambition was to dominate the world. Now, he was just a pathetic warrior who had lost faith in his own strength and was relying on someone else to save his life. Chapter 251, Execution of a Tyrant. He no longer had that previous courage and invincible aura. His frame of mind had changed from tyranny to cowardice. Wan Qingyao was roaring out of desperation. He felt empty inside. The dominating heart of a tyrant had already been crushed by Yi Shiwen in front of everyone. Now, he was just an empty shell of his previous self. Unfortunately, this battle is over. We are witnessing the fall of a tyrant. Warhawk shook his head and said. Indeed. Ji Moon and Wang Purple also nodded. The three super experts were standing on the front line with hands crossed behind their backs. A tyrant like Wan Qingyao is truly a terrifying existence. He is at the peak of truth 8th stage and is certainly at the pinnacle of the younger generation in the entire southeast region. Even I cannot dare to say that I can beat him, and note my point, he is stronger than Yi Shiwen. Yes, Yi Shiwen is merely at the peak of truth 6th stage but his body is extremely tough and intrepid. This is the main reason why he is able to fight with two experts of truth 8th stage. Warhawk's vision could be called sharp and sinister. He had seen through Yi Zaiwen's secret. But the point was that he and the other spectators were able to understand this fact only after actually seeing Yi Shiwen in battle. And the 8th prince and Wan Qinyao did not have such luxury since they had already blundered by challenging Yi Shiwen. Warhawk was confident that if he was at the peak of Truth 8th stage then he might be able to fight with one expert of Truth 8th peak, but certainly not two. But who was Wan Qinyao? Yes, an expert at the pinnacle of Truth 8th stage, a super genius and a tyrannical existence who did not think twice before killing people. One could see that fighting such a ruthless expert was not an easy task, not to mention Yi Shiwen dealt with actually two such tyrants. In simple words, Yi Shiwen went against the heavens will in front of so many people. Wan Qinyao real strength is actually slightly more than the strength of Yi Shiwen, but unfortunately, he seems to have lost his courage and ambition. He succumbed to fear, and even if he survives this battle, perhaps he will never be able to regain his confidence and glory. Those who heard Warhawk's commentary nodded and continued to look at the scene in which Wan Qinyao had completely fallen under the wind. Yi Shiwen was constantly using Phoenix regeneration and was not afraid of anything. He went ahead bravely and unscrupulously shot. Wan Qingyao's attacks were still tyrannical, but even if Yi Shiwen was defeated 10 times, he would stand up 10 times in a completely healed state, whereas if Wan Qinyao was defeated even once, he would start to act all timid and scared. He had completely lost his motivation to beat Yi Shiwen and was simply biding time for the 8th prince to come to his rescue. The screams had fully disappeared within Shuling Array because all of the besieged disciples of the Imperial Union and the Wan True Union had been crucified to death by the evil blood god. Wish! The entire array suddenly collapsed and vanished into thin air. Mu Yuren's complexion was extremely pale as if there wasn't a trace of blood left in his body. His energy had been completely drained by Shuling Array, and not just him, even his fellow disciples of Shuling Union were also in a similar state. Some were in more serious state and immediately fainted. Shuling Array's might was outstanding, so the energy requirement was certainly going to be big. In fact, the energy consumption was so huge that even a high-level expert like Mu Yuran came close to draining his entire Jin Yuan and blood. However, at this time, no one dared to take advantage of Shuling Union's weakened state. Even those who normally hated the Shuling Union and were silently in favor of the Imperial Union and the Wan True Union did not dare to act because the battle was not yet over. They were waiting to see the final outcome. Not to forget, there was a possibility that Yi Shiwen appeared for the sake of Shuling Union, so they were being cautious. Also on another battlefield, Mu Ling and Jane Wuchen were engaged in a superheated battle, though not as destructive as the other one, but there was no less brutality involved in this one as well. At this time, Jian Wuchen growled. His whole body was covered with blood and his bones were truncated at some places. Mu Ling's body was also covered in wounds. There was an exceptionally terrible wound on his chest. This was really a battle between two evenly matched opponents, two veteran sword masters. Mu Ling raised his sword and summoned a yellow river that appeared behind him and instantly flowed towards Jian Wuchen. Mu Ling's battle efficiency was increasing continuously and yet there were no signs of a breakthrough, but his attacks were getting fiercer. Jian Wuchen wasn't deterred by this and he immediately waved his sword to congeal clouds of sword ki around him to protect himself from the onslaught of the yellow river. Boom! Even the terrible collision like this could not compel these two men to retreat. A bit more. Mu Ling's battle efficiency finally broke through the boundary of Truth's 7th stage under the heavy pressure of this insane battle. His imposing aura suddenly stepped into the Truth 8th stage. The spectators who were paying attention to this battle were suddenly stunned. This decisive battle of life and death was between two equally matched opponents, but Mu Ling actually benefited from it. Shua! Mu Ling's sword came very close to Jian Wuchen's neck and stopped right before it was about to behead him. "I do not want to kill you," Mu Ling said. He had defeated Jian Wuchen, but he also admired this man's talent and fighting spirit. Mu Ling admired him as a fellow swordsman and had also heard from Yi Shiwen that Jian Wuchen was actually an honest man with a very clean and pure soul. Indeed, he was nothing more than a sword slave of the 8th prince, but today, this would change. And someday, he would become a truly outstanding hero. Someday, I will find you and we will finish our unfinished business. Jian Wuchen said and turned around to leave. Everyone watched his back profile as he slowly disappeared into the horizon. His fellow disciples were already dead, so there was no point in staying here. Yi Shiwen smiled when he noticed that Mu Ling stepped into the truth 8th stage. Having a strong reinforcement surely strengthened his confidence. Wan Qingyao was startled by this, but it made him even more desperate. He shouted like a crazy guy and shot a rippling blade light at Yi Shiwen. Yi Ziwen's golden hands caught that rippling blade light and tore it apart, then he immediately flew towards Wan Qingyao like a bullet fired from a gun. Yi Ziwen's palm struck out horizontally and simultaneously pounded on Wan Qingyao's chest. Bang! Wan Qingyao was sent flying and the tremendous force contained in his attack broke many of his ribs. Wan Qingyao seemed to have been cornered by Yi Shiwen and appeared like a mad man who was desperately fighting a battle for his own survival. He rushed forward like a lunatic to maliciously attack Yi Shiwen. Moreover, the 8th prince was almost done removing the seal from his spear. He did not take too long to do this, which indicated the extent of his skill and terrifying might. Wan Qingyao was like a ferocious beast in general. He disregarded the consumption of energy and released a black-colored blade light that looked like a lightning from hell as it went straight towards Yi Shiwen. Now you die. Wan Qingyao roared while stubbornly staring at Yi Shiwen. He seemed quite confident in this attack. Yi Shiwen smirked and stuck out his hands as if to tear the space itself. The golden divinities poured out of his hands and crawled towards the black lightning. Boom! The two attacks collided and began to devour each other, setting off layer upon layer of air storms in all directions. When his best attack failed as well, Wan Qingyao's complexion paled. Yi Shiwen sneered but noticed that the 8th prince was about to break free, so he must kill Wan Qingyao as soon as possible. Yi Shiwen rushed forward and seemed in a hurry, but his mind was unusually calm. Bang! Yi Ziwen's palm pounded on the back of Wan Qingyao. Wan Qingyao was directly sent flying. His grandiose stature flew upside down, and right at this moment, Yi Shiwen suddenly jumped in the air, twisted his waist, and launched a kick at Wan Qingyao from above almost instantly. Ah! The 8th prince shouted and finally managed to pull out the spear from his own body. He stood up and looked around to find Yi Shiwen, but at this time, a shocking scene greeted his eyes. Yi Shiwen raised his foot up in the air as if to split Wan Qingyao's body into two halves with a kick. But Wan Qingyao obviously wouldn't allow him to achieve his wish. He immediately released a blade light, but even that could not stop Yi Ziwen's kick. The divinities concentrated on his foot instantly dispersed the blade light and his kick directly landed on Wan Qingyao's body. Bang! A horrible sound of breaking bones resounded everywhere. Wan Qingyao screamed pitifully as his chest was completely crushed by Yi Shiwen. The divinities instantly entered his body and churned his internal organs. Wan Qingyao struggled a bit but ultimately could not withstand the loss of vitality and died on the spot. What? The 8th prince's eyes opened wide in disbelief when he saw how Wan Qingyao was trampled to death by Yi Shiwen. It didn't take him too long to set himself free, but he never expected to see such an unbelievable turn of events. Now there's no one left to interfere. Prepare yourself for the inevitable death, because today, I will make sure that no one comes to save you. Yi Shiwen looked coldly at the 8th prince and said. It was obvious that he would not allow the 8th prince to escape this time. Chapter 252, You were unqualified. The 8th prince was startled and angry at the same time. He never thought that an expert like Wan Qingyao would meet such a horrifying death by getting trampled to death. Setting sun. Oblique wind. Blood. Broken bones. Everything was outlining a desolate scene in the battlefield. Yi Shiwen was not in a hurry to kill the 8th prince. He was taking advantage of this time to restore his power by constantly mobilizing Phoenix regeneration technique. The experts who were observing from the sidelines only saw Yi Shiwen going forward bravely, but they never noticed that he was also actually injured. The strength of these two tyrants was far above his own, so sustaining some injuries during the clashes was obvious because gilded tyrant form could only give a certain amount of protection to him at a time, then he again had to rely on phoenix regeneration to heal. However, these two techniques were not invincible or infinite. A moment ago when he was giving the finishing blow to Wan Qingyao, Yi Xuan accumulated a lot of bruises on his body and had no choice but to heal up using phoenix regeneration. In addition, it was an undeniable fact that he was unable to kill these two tyrants simultaneously. The eighth prince was stuck in a stunned pose for a while, and this allowed Yi Xuan to rest for some time. When Yi Zaiwen's breathing calmed down, he looked coldly at the eighth prince and said, "By now, you certainly wouldn't have imagined that today I will send you to hell." Ha 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 ha. The eighth prince laughed loudly and wasn't intimidated by this. "Today, I will offer you and your people as sacrifices to my cause." The eighth prince's voice thundered as his spear transformed into a dragon and crawled forward as if to pierce the sky. Radiant stars dazzling at the tip of his spear as if buzzed and advanced towards Yi Xuan. The eighth prince was not discouraged and seemed more tenacious and sinister than Wan Qingyao. He needed to get rid of Yi Xuan as soon as possible because Mu Ling had unexpectedly become a possible threat to his life, and if Yi Xuan teamed up with Mu Ling then that would certainly bring his doom. He had no other way out. Yi Zaiwen's golden hands effortlessly tore off the dazzling spear attack, and the very next moment, his golden palms shot forward and swept out a vast golden light which crawled towards the eighth prince. Poof! This golden light was so fast that it instantly approached the eighth prince and pounded on his chest. He spat a mouthful of blood and quickly retreated several steps to neutralize the enormous force contained in Yi Zaiwen's attack. Phoenix regeneration granted an astonishing recovery speed, though at the cost of Jin Yuan or vitality in extreme situations. But, in a matter of few breaths, Yi Xuan had already reached his peak condition, whereas the eighth prince had been injured twice by Yi Xuan, not to mention he had been wounded by his own spear, and he had already spent a considerable amount of energy to set himself free. In other words, the eighth prince was certainly not at his peak condition right now and was actually at a disadvantage. However, Yi Xuan was in peak condition though at the cost of his vitality. Phoenix regeneration had already been displayed to the acme level by Yi Xuan, granting him unimaginable strength and battle efficiency. Yi Zaiwen's imposing aura climbed to the peak and golden divinity was surging in his boiling blood. Although the eighth prince was roaring again and again and deploying various secret technique one after another, but was still being defeated again and again by Yi Zaiwen's golden palm attacks. In the face of absolute strength, all secret techniques were like floating clouds. It was simply impossible for the eighth prince to be an opponent of Yi Xuan in such an injured state. Yi Zaiwen's attacks were getting faster and faster, and at the same time, he had been constantly using phoenix regeneration to stay at his peak condition at all times while launching attacks non-stop. Bang! The eighth prince's blood-bathed body was again sent flying. To spectators, Yi Xuan radically looked like a fearless warrior, who was not only brave but unscrupulous. This observation was because of a simple fact that the rate of recovery was far beyond their imagination. But the same was not true for the eighth prince, and his pitiful appearance was visible to all. The eighth prince's battle efficiency slowly began to reduce. And finally, he was completely suppressed by Yi Xuan. Everyone saw the angry expression on the eighth prince's face changing to a shocked one when he was suddenly trampled by Yi Xuan. He absolutely did not have any strength to fight back. Kaka! 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 The eighth prince's bones gradually cracked one by one and some bones protruded out of his torn-off skin. Now, his body looked like a tattered bag of blood and cracked bones. Everyone looked at each other and was speechless. Was this time for the curtain to drop? Bang! The eighth prince had been brutally trampled by Yi Xuan, but Yi Xuan did not stop there and kicked him so fiercely that he was sent flying miles away and crashed into a mountain. Yi Xuan immediately approached the eighth prince, lifted his hand and landed a malicious slap on his face while holding his neck with the other hand. Wake up, open your eyes and properly witness the final moments of your pathetic life. Today, no one is here to save your ass. You are doomed. Yi Xuan said coldly. Wait. A loud shout resounded throughout the sky. A youth, who appeared to be 20 years old and clad in ordinary clothes, suddenly descended from the sky. Yishuan suddenly raised his eyebrows and asked, "Again? Who are you?" "Emperor Qin." The man said proudly. "What do you want? Do you also want to fight with me?" Yishuan pointed a finger at him and coldly asked. Yishuan was vigilant and activated a sealing-type Jin method to seal the energy within the 8th prince's body. He was also mobilizing Phoenix regeneration technique to maintain a continuous restoration of his injuries and battle efficiency. "Let him go. That's all I want," Emperor Qin said openly without hiding his intention. "That's impossible," Yishuan almost instantly said, leaving no scope for negotiation. "How dare you go against my words?" Emperor Qin said coldly. "Humph. Am I supposed to care?" Yishuan tightened the grip on the 8th prince's neck. Yizaiwen's iron-like claw was almost on the verge of crushing his neck. "Yishuan." A gentle voice sounded from afar. Yishuan turned his head and saw the same Taoist priest he had met earlier. Qing Su descended from the sky like a celestial immortal. "Qing Su, you are also with him?" Yishuan narrowed his eyes and said. He said this in a cold and rough tone and no longer felt like considering Qing Su as his friend. "If possible, I would like you to spare the 8th prince's life." Qing Su sighed and said in a somewhat embarrassed tone, "You have already killed one rare genius of the southeast region. At least spare the 8th prince." "Ha ha." Yishuan laughed loudly then said, "You have chosen such a nice time to come out as a peacemaker. I wonder why not you appeared back when these two so-called rare geniuses had teamed up to kill me. Where were you then? I expect you to give some proper reason." "Because you were unqualified at that time," Emperor Qin said in a cold voice. And what he said was a fact. After all, who would have thought that Yishuan would display such terrifying battle efficiency? Indeed, he was counted among well-known figures, but he was still not considered on the level of super experts. Yishuan smirked. He once again witnessed the law of the strong and how obvious it was in this world. His own life was not worth saving before this battle, but now that he defeated these two tyrants, he suddenly started to get special attention from others. So these two did not feel like interfering earlier because the 8th prince and Wan Qingyao were great powerhouses and rare geniuses. "Listen, Yishuan, these things are very complex and includes the battle involving our southeast region with foreign powers. I hope you can show mercy and spare his life," Qing Su said with a sigh. "Don't make me repeat myself. You are asking for impossible." Yishuan shook his head. "I certainly do not know much about this battle you talk about, but I know that he is a poisonous snake. I don't want any future trouble, so sparing his life is out of the question. And listen to this and deeply engrave it in your heart. You are unqualified to tell me what to do." Yishuan turned towards Emperor Chen and said in a grim voice. And as he said these words, he used his other hand to grasp the 8th prince's head. The next instant, the 8th prince's head was crushed and dropped as a pile of brain paste and blood on the ground. "You are courting death, do you think that I will not kill you?" Emperor Chen's imposing aura instantly enveloped Yizaiwen's body. He was angry because no one had ever dared to not give him face, but Yishuan dared to kill the 8th prince right in front of his eyes. Emperor Chen's breath was extremely formidable, perhaps he was on Truth 9th stage, though his inner state showed signs of instability, but he should be more powerful than the 8th prince. "Then you are free to try." Yishuan followed the rule of tit for tat and instantly summoned a layer of golden divinity over his body. His imposing aura also erupted out of his body at the same time. "Well, since it has come to this, we will say nothing else." Qing Su could feel Yizaiwen's anger. He was finding it difficult to stand on the opposite of Yishuan. If before, he had stood in support of Yishuan, then it was perhaps okay to interfere now, but his current interference was no different from taking advantage of his friendship with Yishuan. Emperor Chen's fiery eyes were staring at Yishuan and it seemed like he would launch an attack at any time. Yi Shiwen did not dare to relax even for a moment because Emperor Chen was extremely strong. However, it was true that the opposite party did not have grounds to blame Yi Shiwen. If Yi Shiwen had not killed the 8th prince, then he would certainly have become a major threat to him or his family in the future. Yi Shiwen would obviously first ensure his own safety, otherwise, why would he care about the well-being of the southeast region? Everyone was stunned while witnessing this scene. Who was this Emperor Chen? Almost nobody knew him and had never heard of him since coming to this island. On the contrary, Warhawk was a bit surprised when he saw Emperor Chen and seemed to know his identity. Chapter 253, Constant Changes. The scene fell into a strange calm atmosphere. It seemed like Yi Shiwen and Emperor Chen would soon engage in battle, but this time, no one was daring to underestimate Yi Shiwen even though his opponent was at a much higher level. Who was this Emperor Chen? His strength was apparent to all, but what was he planning to do? Yi Zaiwen's whole body was covered with Jin Yuan, and while at the same time, golden divinities were crawling all over his body. He seemed all prepared for battle. The enemy was very strong, so Yi Shiwen was not in a mood to make concessions. Instead, he intended to go all out from the get-go. You'll be sorry. Emperor Chen looked at Qing Su and seemed a bit afraid of him. Then, he turned his face and looked coldly at Yi Shiwen and said. Afterward, he immediately turned around to leave. When Emperor Chen left, Qing Su did not stop either. He looked at Yi Shiwen and smiled with an apologetic expression on his face, then quickly vanished from there in front of everyone. Soon after these two left, Yi Shiwen and Mu Ling also left and went straight towards a secret mountain valley. In that secret valley, Wu Shaochuan was sitting cross-legged on the ground and meditating to recover. At this time, his whole body was stained with blood. How did this happen? Why are you injured? Yi Shiwen asked. Those bastards, though their main force was stationed to ambush you, they still left behind a lot of experts. Wu Shaochuan said. Since Yi Shiwen knew himself being the main target of the 8th prince and Wan Qingyao, so he naturally could not be careless. He certainly rushed into their ambush, but it was all part of a plan. Yi Shiwen collaborated with the Shuling Union and helped them in planting a large Shuling array. The Shuling Union was naturally not going to stand still and patiently wait to get slaughtered. They also did not want to escape because it could later put a major stain on their reputation. Yi Shiwen also asked Wu Shaochuan to go to Imperial Union's encampment to help him in rescuing Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen, who were rumored to have been captured by the 8th prince, though these rumors might be a hoax to trap Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen knew that Wu Shaochuan's strength was enough for the job. After all, the main forces were going to be handled by him and the Shuling Union. Hence, Wu Shaochuan would only need to deal with residual forces in the enemy encampment. However, it seemed like Wu Shaochuan was injured while performing the task. Are you okay? Yi Shiwen quickly asked. Relax, I am fine. Their residual force was not a big deal and these are minor injuries. Wu Shaochuan waved his hand and said. His injuries were a result of his own fault of underestimating the enemy, but I am really glad that you came back, Yi Shiwen. So that means those two bastards are really dead. Wu Shaochuan was astonished to see that there wasn't a single scratch on Yi Zaiwen's body. This was simply hard to imagine that he actually killed those two tyrants. Yes. Yi Shiwen nodded. You're so fierce. Wu Shaochuan gave the thumbs up and smiled. But this stirred his wound and his face immediately contorted in pain. But Yi Shiwen, I did not see your sister apprentice and brother apprentice in the enemy encampment. Wu Shaochuan said, damn it, that bastard actually tricked us. I interrogated some people I caught in the encampment and found out that they never caught your fellow disciples. It was a trap to force you out. I knew it. So it was really a trap. Yi Shiwen trusted Wu Shaochuan and only he knew that Yi Shiwen had been looking for Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen, then how did the 8th prince find out about it? Yi Shiwen had asked Wu Shaochuan to find them but outsiders did not know about it. Although Qing Su was related to Wu Shaochuan and knew about it, and Yi Shiwen was not at all happy with him, but had a feeling that he would not do such a thing. So in the end, who leaked this information to the 8th prince? Yi Xuan felt strange while thinking more and more about it, but now those two tyrants were dead, making this thing a permanent mystery for him. Well, I asked a lot of formidable people for help. Wu Shaochuan said, perhaps, one of them betrayed me, but fortunately it doesn't matter anymore because those two are already dead. Otherwise, this could have led to disastrous consequences. No matter what, I thank you for helping me today. Yi Xuan said with a smile, but his mind was still busy thinking about this matter. The news about how Yi Xuan fought with the 8th prince and Wan Qingyao and killed them both shook the entire Demon Island. Yi Xuan became a well-known figure, much more famous than he used to be. If Emperor Chen had not appeared at the end of the battle and threatened Yi Xuan, then all of the experts would have come forward to put a crown on Yi Zaiwen's head. Besides Yi Xuan, no one else would have dared to pull off such a stunt. What, that Yi Xuan actually killed 2 experts of Truth 8th stage? Yes, 2 experts of Truth 8th stage were not his match. Wan True Union really had it coming. Wan Qingyao and the 8th prince's death shocked the entire Demon Island, but nothing could become an eternal topic of discussion on this island. The topic slowly submerged under several other topics which popped up one after another. 3 months passed quickly. On the Demon Island, several young geniuses lost their lives while several others obtained a lot of benefits. Their cultivation increased by leaps and bounds and they suddenly became the new champions on this island. For example, shortly after the death of the 2 tyrants, both Mu Ling and Wu Shaochuan became famous throughout the Demon Island. In a competition for relics and vestiges, Mu Ling defeated Wang Purple and his alliance, and this put him in the list of top players on the Demon Island. And in a month's time, Wu Shaochuan officially stepped into Truth 8th stage and thereby also landed on the list of top players. These changes continued to take place for 3 months. During this period, several heroes lost their glory while several others made brave appearances. In a flash, almost 6 months had already passed on the Demon Island since the island first closed down. In a period of only 6 months, many experts had multiple breakthroughs and there were some who actually leaped from Truth 2nd stage to Truth 6th stage. Although this island was not as big as Zhenwu Jie, but it held more resources in comparison, enough for these young geniuses. At least, they did not have worry about practicing resources. 1 year's worth of cultivation on this island was equivalent to 10 years' worth of cultivation in the outside world, or even more, to be honest. Of course, the risk was also high because only a few hundred experts were still alive out of more than 1,000 summoned experts. In fact, almost half of the summoned experts had already died. Although the cultivation was very efficient here, the mortality rate was also quite high. In addition to the deadly fights between human experts, the biggest problem was battles between humans and demon beasts. The young geniuses who were summoned to this island were under 50 years of age, and even the strongest human expert was still in Truth Realm, but the same was not true for demon beasts. Indeed, most of the times the demon beasts were in Truth Realm, but there were many half-step legendary level demon beasts as well. Not to mention, there were ethnic groups with legendary realm demon beasts, and some were even beyond legendary realm, i.e., those old monsters that wandered the depths of this island and were presumably in the Saint Realm. Therefore, even if the experts were slowly exploring the depths of the Demon Island, they hadn't ventured into the true depths of the island and were only exploring the peripheral zone. Those who dared to go to the real depths never came back. But even so, there were many who still benefited a lot from their explorations, and this was the reason why their cultivations progressed by leaps and bounds, placing them among top players. The latest rumor shocked the entire Demon Island when experts got to know that Warhawk found an ancient egg which was actually a relic of ancient times. It was an egg of a golden eagle and they found it floating in the air. The chick was actually at Small Truth Realm, and some experienced experts said that if this egg had hatched long time ago, when it was supposed to hatch, then this chick would have been born directly into the legendary realm. This discovery immediately sent a wave of excitement among human experts. It was said that only dragons gave birth to legendary-level baby dragons. So the mother of this egg was actually a demon beast that was on the level of dragons. This news could stir the entire southeast region. Chapter 254, Demon Beast Egg. It was a well-known fact that all demon beast eggs came with expiry dates and must hatch within a certain period of time. Otherwise, these eggs wouldn't be able to hatch and stay buried under the ground for a long time, ending up becoming a fossil. Some would rot, whereas some would miraculously survive the lapse of so many years, however, at the cost of consumption of vitality. If these eggs had hatched countless years ago, when they were supposed to hatch naturally, then the newly born demon beasts would probably take birth directly in legendary realm or in a realm even above that. Moreover, it was said that there should be more than one egg buried under the ground. This spread a wave of joy and excitement among the human experts, and they rushed to capture the remaining eggs. Even one such egg would be a very big harvest. Soon, the second golden egg was discovered by human experts. It belonged to a pterosaur, and the expert who found it was only at truth fourth stage. As soon as he unearthed the egg, it hatched, but things didn't go well for that expert. On the contrary, the baby pterosaur gave him a fatal blow and killed him almost instantly, before flying away from there. However, this was not enough to deter the crazy experts from looking for the buried eggs, because they believed that the killed expert was careless and incompetent for the job. They were overconfident that a newly born demon beast should not be that big of a threat to their lives. So, experts from all over the island flocked towards that area where the buried egg had been discovered. The demon beasts that hatched out from these eggs were certainly not like the common demon beasts that were prevalent on this island. They were far stronger than rest of the demon beasts of the demon island. One must know that common species of demon beasts found on this island were far stronger than the species found in outside world. So, it was easy to guess that these eggs belonged to tyrannical demon beasts of ancient era. However, survival through the passage of numerous years caused consumption of a major part of eggs' vitality and essence. No wonder, demon beasts that were supposed to be taking birth in legendary realm were now taking birth in truth realm. Not all knew about this fact. Later, another matter shocked everyone. This was also related to demon beasts, because on the demon island, even if there were many demon beasts, but there still remained a division of territory among them. They rarely crossed into each other's territories, and since human experts preferred to not barge into the territories of demon beasts, there was rarely a clash between the two races. However, after the hunt for eggs became popular, the human experts couldn't restrain themselves and started intruding into the territory of demon beasts. Originally, there was a presence of formidable demon beasts in depths of the demon island, and one such tyrannical demon beast visited Eagle Union encampment. It was a bird-type demon beast of legendary realm, a senior beast who personally visited Warhawk and his men to take back the golden-winged eagle's chick that was subdued by Warhawk. Reportedly, the chick belonged to an ancient mighty demon god, and demon beasts did not want it to fall into the hands of human beings. The two sides came very close to war, and Warhawk wasn't scared at all, even while facing a legendary-level demon beast, but the fight did not happen because the golden-winged eagle's chick was reluctant to leave Warhawk and actually wanted to become his partner. So, the senior demon beast had to bitterly leave. Before leaving, it bowed submissively, not to show respect to the human experts, but to the small chick who was still in truth realm. This incident was a solid proof that demon beasts weren't dumb creatures without wisdom. It was just an ignorant perception that must be changed, especially because now these human experts were on an island which was home to tyrannical demon beasts. Human experts always underestimated demon beasts and didn't think twice before massacring them for their own benefits. But the wise demon beasts of this island were a different story altogether, pertaining to their high wisdom and tyrannical strength. However, this again made more and more people crazy to find the eggs. After all, who wouldn't want to have an ancient beast as pet? When a newborn beast was already born in the higher stages of truth realm, one could imagine how powerful it would become after reaching adulthood. Some experts were planning to capture one and sell it in the future for huge benefits. Human experts were no fool and reacted quickly. Now they knew from Warhawk's example that newborn beasts could be subdued and thereby turned into loyal pets. Although they could not fight with the demon beasts lurking in the depths of the island, but they could at least capture the eggs. Suddenly, several experts rushed towards the area that was rumored to be hiding eggs. In a cave, a bundle of black light was blooming, and a strange dragon howl burst out in the form of shock waves but was soon prevented from going outside by a circular membrane made up of energy. What kind of mysterious technique is Yi Shuwen practicing in there? He is creating so much turbulence. From a distant place, Wu Shaochuan said while looking at the cave's entrance. There was an incredible look in his eyes. I do not know. Mu Ling replied and waved his sword, releasing an endless stream of light into the sky. Since that battle, Wu Shaochuan was disinclined to return to the small faction of Qing Su and few other rogue experts. He preferred staying with Yi Shuwen and Mu Ling and formed a small group of 3 people. Not to mention, this trio was strong enough to deal with any possible threat on this island. Now on the entire Demon Island, situation was getting increasingly bizarre, more and more dangerous, so no one dared to stay alone. After practicing for 3 months, 2 days ago, Mu Ling finally stepped into the Truth 9th stage. Although his inner state was not yet stable, but this was enough to put him among the most outstanding human elites on this island. Wu Shaochuan was also not much behind and reached the peak of Truth 8th stage. He was almost on the verge of stepping into Truth 9th stage. Among all of the summoned geniuses, Mu Ling and Wu Shaochuan were clearly the super elites among elites, undoubtedly among the top. Despite being so young, they managed to reach such higher levels. Of course, there were few other experts that were at higher levels than these two when they came to this island, but all those experts were older. Basically, it could be said that these two were bound to become dominating figures in the southeast region sooner or later. In fact, not just Mu Ling and Wu Shaochuan, all other experts were going to become tyrannical figures in the future. When considering Yi Shuwen, 3 months ago, he was able to defeat 2 experts of Truth 8th peak. When these 3 were together in one group, who would dare to provoke them? Yi Shuwen was concentrating on training and cultivating, while the other 2 members of group were keeping watch, even though they knew that no one would dare to provoke them. Wu Shaochuan was very satisfied because while staying with 2 cultivation freaks like Mu Ling and Yi Shuwen, he could also concentrate more on cultivating. Not to mention, he felt safe with these 2 trustworthy friends. Mu Ling also did not mind being with Yi Shuwen and Wu Shaochuan, as long as it didn't hinder his practice. His cultivation relied on dead qi and Yellow River, and he had limited time on this island, so he could not afford to waste time. One must know that his progress speed was almost equivalent to that of Yi Shuwen. The 3 experts usually shared their respective experiences with each other and were benefiting greatly. It seems like he will soon have a breakthrough, then his power will shatter the flag array. Mu Ling said. Yi Shuwen always found it very difficult to break through since his foundation was strong and each breakthrough required huge accumulation of energy. The difficulty level of his breakthrough was much above that of ordinary experts, but once the breakthrough occurred, then his strength would increase dramatically and directly surpass the strength of the experts at much higher level. How is he able to do it? I am quite interested. Let's go and check. Wu Shaochuan smiled and said. Not interested. Mu Ling answered. Many people want to obtain it, still cannot obtain, you know. Wu Shaochuan curled up his lips and said. My way is the way of the sword. Everything else is like a distraction for me. Mu Ling indifferently said. Man, you are really a cultivation madman. Wu Shaochuan said and realized that this was precisely the reason why he was one step behind Mu Ling. He lacked the craziness that Yi Shuwen and Mu Ling displayed when it came to cultivation. But he was not planning to change because his natural disposition included his free, easygoing, and straightforward nature. One of the prohibited taboos in the world of martial arts included abstaining from concealing one's own natural disposition. Cultivation not only targeted at the improvement of body but also mind and soul. So a cultivator must never try to conceal his true disposition while cultivating. The disposition of the 8th prince was also a kind of nature that helped him a lot in getting stronger. Boom! A loud explosive sound echoed throughout the cave. Dash! Chapter 255, Foul-Mouthed Cub, Boom! A loud explosive sound echoed throughout the cave. A blue figure strode out from the cave with a sort of smile on his face. Several deep-water black snakes were flying around him and growling. Although his stature looked exquisite and fairly small in comparison to the monstrous beasts floating around him, but his terrifying imposing aura was enough to show who was the boss here. Yi Shiwen was holding poisonous dragon water control flag array in his hand. After several months of training day and night, Yi Zaiwen was planning to reach Truth 9th stage, and in order to reach this stage, he had collected the corpses and souls of deepwater black snakes for later consumption. Since, at the time of breaking to the half-step legendary realm, he would need to have a proper amount of accumulation as well as a difference in the quality of energy. Also because of this, so far, he was only able to reach Truth's 7th stage since he was focusing more on the accumulation of heavy amounts of energy. However, now that he had completely entered Truth's 7th stage, one could see that his strength was not at all inferior to any of the experts of Truth's 9th stage. This really pumped an invincible confidence inside him. You had a breakthrough? Wu Shaochuan asked. Yes. Yi Shiwen said with a smile. He had successfully stepped into Truth's 7th stage, and for him, its significance was hard to put in words. In short, now he was no longer afraid of anyone from Truth Realm. Unless his opponent was an expert of half-step legendary realm or above, he could easily deal with rest of the experts on this island. Now, he could also be regarded as strongest in the younger generation of experts. Yi Zaiwen's practice time was much shorter when compared with other young geniuses, so this was a huge achievement for him. Come on, let's go. Yi Shiwen said and grinned at the same time. Where are we going? Wu Shaochuan asked. We are going to check out that place where demon beast eggs are buried. Yi Shiwen said. It has been so noisy lately. Let's go and see what's with all this commotion. According to the rumors, these so-called ancient eggs were buried in a stretch of river basin, more like a very spacious plain, surrounded by cliffs from all sides. At this time, the entire area was overrun by experts and all of them were trying to find eggs. Yi Shiwen and his group quickly reached there and began the inspection. Suddenly, a loud voice came from a distant place. Haha, I did it, I found an egg. Everyone heard the voice and immediately rushed towards him. They were surprised to find a young disciple who was holding a 1-meter-long egg in his hands and was laughing like a crazy guy. Now that he found an egg, this almost instantly increased his importance in the eyes of other experts. Just look at the extent of his happiness. But he has made a mistake of thinking that just because he found an egg, he can subjugate the cub. That's a wishful thinking right there. An expert commented with a disdainful look on his face. Just wait and witness how he gets killed by the cub. Sure, I expect nonetheless from the cub of a legendary demon beast from ancient era. Yi Shiwen glimpsed at the egg and couldn't conceal the greedy look in his eyes. After all, there was a high probability that this cub contained the noble blood of an ancient god beast, just like Warhawk's new pet. So far, Yi Shiwen had only seen gods' descendants who were basically separated by hundreds of generations from the original gods. But, there was a chance that this egg belonged to a real god. One could imagine why this cub was going to be a rare and priceless treasure. The young expert did not waste a single moment and immediately used his hands to inject Jin Yuan into the egg, forcing it to hatch. He was not a fool, knew very well that everyone was eyeing the egg and if he tried to escape now then he would surely be tracked by others. So, his only option was to forcibly make it hatch on the spot and subjugate the cub. The elite young geniuses that were summoned on this island were no stupid. They were very smart and knew how to act in a given situation. No one interrupted the hatching process and continued to watch from sidelines. It was hard to determine how long it took but the egg finally began to hatch. Kaka. 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 The eggshell broke off little by little, and finally, a little black beast crawled out of it. Everyone exclaimed at this scene when they saw a meter-long cub with its whole body covered with profane breath. Judging by its appearance, it looked like a wolf, more like a coyote because of its small appearance. Its black body was overflowing with terrifying breath. One could say that a seemingly divine glory was overflowing from its body. The young expert was going to reach out and touch it, but it suddenly opened its eyes. There was an aggressive look in its eyes, and just then, it opened its mouth and shot a beam of energy that blasted the arm of that young expert. A pitiful scream echoed everywhere as the bottom half part of the egg, that was still intact, fell to the ground and disintegrated into several pieces. The coyote stood on the ground, uttered a loud howl, then coldly looked at the human experts, as if issuing a warning to stay away. It just took a few seconds for its quivering limbs to stand firmly on the ground. And the very next instant, it appeared vigorous and healthy as if it was not a newborn at all. Its growth was almost visible to naked eye, just too amazing. It looked like a coyote but with a fearsome oppressive aura. The experts began to look for an opportunity to grab it. However, no one knew that its first few words would be, "You fuckers." Then it turned around to run away. Everyone was stunned by this. What the fuck just happened? A newborn cub actually spoke. No, it swore to be specific. In general, a demon beast's wisdom was dependent on its strength and level, but this scene was still hard to digest. It was common knowledge that it was always difficult for demon beasts to acquire wisdom, especially for low-level demon beasts. But the truth was that it was equally difficult even for high-level demon beasts. The only difference was that Sciention-level demon beasts could not attain high wisdom no matter how much they tried, but high-level demon beasts, though after facing a lot of difficulties, could actually achieve great wisdom and intelligence, enough to be able to speak like humans. But, irrespective of level or strength, it was never easy for demon beasts to attain enough wisdom to speak like human beings. It was simply unheard of that a newborn cub could actually speak so fluently. It really came as a shock for everyone. Just what was the origin of this coyote? Now, everyone had started to feel that it had a tyrannical background. Color of greed began to appear in everybody's eyes. A burly expert suddenly rushed forward shouting, "This cub is mine." His big hand went forward to grab the coyote. "I am not your sister, fucker." The small cub cursed out loud and spat a divine beam towards that expert. Bang! He screamed while his whole body disintegrated in front of everyone. He died almost instantly. But his death was not enough to stop others from pursuing the cub. The cub saw many people rushing towards it and immediately turned around to flee from there. A stream of divine light appeared beneath his feet and suddenly boosted his speed several times. Ha ha ha, this wolf or dog or whatever it is. It is too much fun. Wu Xiaochuan laughed loudly like a madman. It was fun to see how everyone was trying best to catch this foul-mouthed cub. Even Mu Ling's eyes flashed with a curious look clearly visible in them. After all, the cub really intrigued him. He had never witnessed such a bizarre scene before. There were 200 to 300 experts in the vicinity and all of them instantly rushed toward the escaping cub. The cub was very tyrannical, it was jumping from left to right to throw off the chasers. No one was able to catch up with its speed. In fact, its agility skill was so advanced that it would make anyone wonder about its background. Soon, it disappeared in a blink of an eye and left only a sense of regret in everyone's heart. But at this time, Yishuan suddenly moved, and in a flash, a beam of light appeared beneath him and blasted him forward like a super jet. Mu Ling and Wu Xiaochuan also followed after him. Who is this man? He suddenly began to chase, but with his agility skill, it should be impossible to catch the cub. Someone said. He looks somewhat familiar. Oh wait, I think. This guy is that infamous Yishuan from the rumors. Yes, you are right. I saw how he single-handedly slaughtered those two tyrants. He is undoubtedly that Yishuan, but he has not come out for a long time. I almost forgot his appearance. He hasn't appeared for past few months, but he suddenly shows up today. Did he actually come here for the egg? There's nothing to be surprised about, after all, who isn't interested in these demon beast eggs? He would not even bother to chase if he was not interested. Well, considering his strength, he should be able to deal with that cub, but he lacks enough speed to catch up with it. The cub is too fast for any of us. Yishuan and the other two suddenly vanished from there, and this caught the crowd's attention. At this time, a pair of wings appeared behind Yishuan. These were devil wings but were thoroughly covered with golden light. The wings were certainly generated from a devil power technique, but since they were wrapped in a layer of golden divinities, Yishuan wasn't worried about exposing them in front of everyone. Dash. Chapter 256, Great Changes on the Demon Island. The devil wings no longer gave off the feel of being made up of dense mochi, though its mighty magical powers were still intact, but the ominous devil magic had been replaced by a divine feel. The people of Zhenwujia might not care about the evil ways of martial arts, but they were very much concerned about devil ways of martial arts. After all, devil race was by far the strongest archenemy of humanity. When Yishuan opened his devil wings, his speed suddenly rose dramatically. He tore a golden streamer in the sky and instantly went towards that small wolf. The wolf cub initially thought that it had gotten rid of the human experts, but did not expect to see a golden figure suddenly catching up. It suddenly cursed out loud, "Fuck, this is unreasonable." Although it had a small body, it was very fast and was also using an extraordinary agility skill. It was so fast that even Yishuan, with his strength equivalent to an expert of truth 9th stage, might not be able to catch up. No wonder, he had to resort to using devil wings. In fact, even an expert of legendary realm might not be able to catch it. The extent of this cub's speed could be imagined. However, an expert of the legendary realm would not need to chase in the first place, since with just a flick of hand, they would directly confine the space, making it impossible to make an escape. But, Yizaiwan's devil wings technique was not an ordinary devil technique. It was a top-tier technique, and since he had already perfected it, he was able to display extremely high acceleration and reach unimaginable speeds in a matter of seconds. Therefore, within a moment, Yishuan caught up with it and stretched out his hands that suddenly transformed into a big hand, made up of Jin Yuan, and proceeded to grab it. It turned back and spat a divine beam towards Yishuan. Bang! Yizaiwan's big hand was unaffected and directly caught the beam and crushed it. The coyote was very strong, but its strength was only comparable to that of an expert of truth 8th stage. However, its attacks were simply useless on Yishuan, who possessed a tyrannical golden body. "You fucker!" The coyote said angrily and turned around to escape, but it was just a wishful thinking on its part, because Yizaiwan's big hand instantly printed a direct slap on this foul-mouthed cub's face, sending it flying for a large distance. Yizaiwan's wings fluttered and he slowly descended to the side of the cub that was lying on the ground. "You insolent bastard!" It was angry because this was the first time it was slapped by a human being after taking birth. It could not accept the fact that it had been defeated by a human, not just in speed but also strength. Yishuan grinned while thinking that it was really very intriguing. He asked, "Well, what is your family background?" The cub pretended as if it didn't hear anything and simply ignored Yishuan. "You should consider answering, because if you don't, I would prefer cooking a pot of dog soup using you as the ingredient, so delicious." Yishuan said with an evil smile. "Go fuck yourself, this prince is a wolf, get it? I am not a dog." The cub instantly said in an angry tone. "Whatever." Yishuan said dismissively, "Why are there so many eggs belonging to ridiculously powerful beasts buried in this area? If you answer honestly, I'll let you go." Yishuan was not particularly interested in subduing an extraordinary beast cub, especially this one. He could see that this wolf cub's wisdom was way too high for an ordinary demon beast. Yishuan was impressed by its intelligence, strength, and skills. There was a high possibility that subjugation might not work on it because its wisdom was similar to that of human beings, not to mention it had a rebellious personality. Yishuan could not say for sure that he could subjugate it, and if he could not make it willingly surrender, and ended up hurting it in the process, then it might summon danger for him. Since he was not aware of this cub's background, which was bound to be extraordinary. Moreover, Yishuan believed that there should be more eggs buried in this area and he would get plenty of opportunities later on. Yishuan mainly wanted to know why there were such extraordinary demon beast eggs in this area. Also, Just like Warhawk attracted the attention of a legendary-level demon beast senior, he also needed to be careful not to offend any high-level demon beast for his own good. But one thing was certain, that there was a hidden secret behind all this. I do not know. The cub mumbled while still lying on the ground as if feigning death. At this time, Mu Ling and Wu Xiaochuan also arrived and saw the small wolf playing possum on the ground. They were a bit surprised, did not know what exactly happened here. Yi Shiwen explained things to them and they felt like having a headache all of a sudden. Of course, they could not hurt this cub, otherwise that might attract the attention of a legendary-level demon beast. Yi Shiwen vaguely guessed that this cub's background should be extraordinary. If something happened to it, then he would definitely be chased down on this island for the remaining months. Usually, as soon as the eggs hatched, those demon beast seniors would immediately appear to protect the newborn baby beast, without giving any chance to human experts to hurt or capture the baby beast. This meant that this cub was also one of those so-called untouchable and precious babies. However, it was not saying anything, rather there was a treacherous and slick look on its face. As if it would rather die than surrender. Yi Shiwen was a bit surprised by this and secretly praised it. Yi Shiwen did not have a way to find out about the secret from the wolf cub, though it clearly knew something and was not willing to tell. Since he could not resort to brutal means to force the information out of its mouth, as its rebellious personality was a big hurdle. So he decided to keep this wolf cub at his side. Perhaps, later on, it would willingly tell things about this mysterious island. This wolf cub was the only way to find out the real secrets about this strange island. As far as the wolf cub's attitude was concerned, it had non-violent, non-cooperation attitude, and its only option was to stay with Yi Shiwen. The race to capture eggs was getting intense and complicated. A lot of people had started going crazy to obtain an egg of their own. After the wolf cub, several demon beast eggs were dug out, but nothing good came out of it. Most of the cubs fled, and almost every time, demon beast seniors rushed to protect their own, and this led to a lot of chaos. In the end, for human experts, their hard work was all in vain. Certainly, there were some experts who were successful, such as Ji Moon obtained a Hudisaurus, which was an extremely rare demon beast. Its whole body was of a Tyrannosaurus, but with a pair of butterfly wings on its back. However, the third super expert, Wang Purple, was the most unfortunate one, because when he finally got a cub, it attracted a demon beast senior and he was half beaten to death, not to mention that cub was also taken away from him. The good thing was that the opposite party was not serious, otherwise, he would have already been killed. The unrest continued to get stronger and stronger. The silence of the night spread a chill everywhere, while the constant shrieks could be heard transmitting from the ominous mountain. The roars of several demon beasts also disappeared under the overwhelming presence of those shrieks. Not far away, the Yellow River was flowing down the forest and numerous ghost soldiers could be seen marching upon it. They had been following this daily routine for thousands of years, going on an expedition against an unknown enemy. Mu Ling was indulged in a continuous battle in the Yellow River and basically cultivating. He was fortunate to be able to practice in this river of the dead, which was also the main reason why his cultivation progress rate was so high. Several days have passed. Why haven't your relatives come to pick you up? A large bonfire was burning high and mighty, and a considerably large demon beast was supported on two thick branches and was being roasted in the fire. As the roasting continued, its meat was gradually turning yellow while the fat oil was dripping down into the fire, contributing to its intensity. Not far away, the wolf cub was constantly pacing back and forth. When compared to a few days ago, its size was now significantly larger and it also looked a lot stronger. Obviously, it was still constantly complaining, "This prince is not going to eat this lowly demon beast." Nonetheless, its eyes were constantly staring at the almost cooked demon beast. It was reluctant to remove his gaze from the delicious food. Yi Shiwen slowly rotated the branch to roast the uncooked portions of flesh, and the delicious fragrance suddenly spread in the air. Yi Zaiwen had been relaxing for the last few days. A short break was necessary to stabilize his inner state. Anyway, there was no point in being impatient when it came to cultivation. Yi Shiwen felt odd because when other demon babies came out, Soon, demon beast seniors rushed to take them away. But this wolf cub had been out for quite some time and no one came to pick it up. Though he did not know what means they used to find out about the birth of these cubs, but in this case, Yi Shuwen felt something was off. They are all dead. The wolf cub did not turn his head and said in a low voice. Its eyes were still staring at the demon beast meat. From the beginning, he tried several times to escape, but each time, he was caught by Yi Shuwen within seconds. Now, he was an orphan who did not know where to go. Though it did not take him too long to understand that Yi Shuwen was not going to hurt him. According to what he said, Yi Shuwen also came to know that he was homeless. No wonder no one came to pick him up. However, when Yi Shuwen asked him about other things, he refused to talk about anything. Just when Yi Shuwen seemed all prepared to taste the meat, suddenly, horrible shrieks began to echo everywhere. The ominous chi swept from the mountain and instantly obscured the entire sky in the form of dense black clouds. The condensed black clouds suddenly gave rise to endless rain on the island. The sudden invasion of Inchi and Deadki sucked away lives out of the trees, leaving them in a withered state. The barbecue was instantly corroded by the torrential downpour and ruined the bonfire. Then, Yi Shuwen and the others suddenly heard extremely loud roars of demon beasts coming from the depths of the island. They had never heard such horrifying roars before and it was not hard to tell that these roars belonged to extremely tyrannical demon beasts. Dash. Chapter 257, Tomb Slave reappears, what the fuck, my meat. It's all ruined now. The wolf cub could not bear to see the delicious meat corroding in front of his eyes and his anger suddenly soared to the sky. The so-called proud prince could not control this outburst. Yi Shuwen immediately stood up and looked at the sky. Wu Shaochuan and Mu Ling also looked at the sky and did not know what actually happened all of a sudden. Beep! A tyrannical golden bird flew across the sky and was headed towards the huge ominous mountain. Yi Shuwen noticed that this golden bird was actually the golden-winged bird that had destroyed his boat when he was entering the island. Then a giant flaming bird flew from another direction and went towards the ominous mountain. Seems like a major event. Wu Shaochuan murmured. It was easy to tell from the present environment on the island that something was off and this was certainly an important matter. And it was kind of scary to see that this matter was somehow related to the ominous mountain. The rain got harder and black clouds enveloped the entire island. It seemed as if the entire island had been swallowed by a deathly atmosphere, making it seem like the world of death itself. Yi Shuwen and Wu Shaochuan immediately used Zhen Yuan to resist the corrosive rain, whereas Mu Ling was not all affected by the rain, on the contrary, the rain was actually absorbed by his body. Then, abruptly, a figure appeared in the distance. Yi Shuwen saw a somewhat emaciated old man flying in the rain, directly across the sky. He seemed very far away, but the very next instant, he appeared in front of them. It was actually the tomb slave. Yi Zaiwen's pupils shrank because he clearly remembered what tomb slave told him about making a vow to always guard the tombs and not being able to leave the premises of graveyard. But now he seemed to have come out and this certainly showed that something big happened on this island which compelled him to come out of the graveyard. And this was certainly related to the sudden outbreak on the ominous mountain. Greetings to Honorable Senior. Yi Shuwen and Mu Ling quickly saluted to show respect to the old man. Wu Shaochuan did not know who he was but since Yi Shuwen was showing respect to this old man then he was bound to be a great persona. So, Wu Shaochuan quickly followed the other two and gave his salute. What have you decided about the thing I told you earlier? Are you ready to take up the task? The tomb slave said. It is solely in your control whether you want to do it or not, but remember, if you are unable to accomplish this task then forget about leaving this island, you might actually lose your lives. Yi Zaiwen's complexion suddenly changed, so this matter was really very serious. Moreover, they might not be able to leave this island. For these geniuses, staying on this island was only a part of an adventure. No one wanted to spend their entire lives on this deadly island. Their motive was to get stronger on this island, then go back and display their newly obtained strength to the entire world, not to mention also to contribute to their respective sex strength. However, this matter had turned into a serious possibility that everyone would end up dying on this island. Senior, what exactly has happened? At least let us know. Yi Shiwen said. At least he would like to know what had really happened, then he would further decide whether to go or not. What we are witnessing is the period of time that comes once in a millennium. During this period, those undead that reside on Ominous Mountain experience great suppression and are at their weakest level. The old man explained, in fact, the undead are confined in a powerful matrix method on the Ominous Mountain and it's impossible for them to come down, but the situation has gotten worse because a gap has appeared in the matrix method and those undead will most likely come out through the gap. So I sent the demon beasts of this island to rush to the Ominous Mountain and make sure to block the gap, otherwise, the consequences would be disastrous. Even if the undead face a major reduction in their strengths during this period of time, they are still very scary, and if even one of them managed to come out, then forget the demon island, the entire world would face a serious danger. Now, they finally understood the seriousness of this situation. Especially, Yi Shiwen understood better because he could tell that this would perhaps affect the entire world. These so-called undead monsters were insanely formidable and scary. Even after facing the suppression that appeared once in a millennium, they were still so terrifying that even one was enough to threaten the world's security. However, this matrix method was so powerful that it was able to confine these undead monsters for tens of thousands of years. According to what Yi Mo said, the person, who must have set up this matrix tens thousands of years ago, was truly a terrifying being, simply beyond the comprehension of this realm. However, a gap appeared in such a powerful matrix method, though only a small gap, but enough to put the entire world in danger. The creator of this matrix method must be an extremely formidable being. Or perhaps, it was not created by a person but an organization. Yi Shiwen had already started to notice that there was basically no subordination system among the demon beasts on this island. It was as if demon beasts had divided their respective territories on the island and no one interfered with each other. Of course, there was no sign of intrusion as well, which indicated a very smooth regulation and territorial understanding among the beasts. The demon beasts only hunted in their respective territories and there were no signs of cross-border attacks. However, the appearance of ancient eggs was enough to hint that this demon island was hiding a secret, but this time, things got even weirder than before. The wise and exotic demon beasts of legendary level or above were actually following the orders of the tomb slave. It seemed like this island previously belonged to a tyrannical faction, and although there was a decline in its influence over time, the chief of each demon beast clan was possibly still a member of that ancient faction and the old man was their boss. And even if this faction's influence had declined, were still a tyrannical existence for Zhen Wujie. It was like a clash between two disastrous forces. Why did the demon island appear once in every 50 years? What was the reason behind summoning young heroes to this island? What was the point of ghost soldiers going on an expedition every night in the Yellow River, and against whom? Who was this old man? Were the demon beasts on this island really the descendants of God? Yi Shiwen was immersed in deep thoughts as these questions quickly flashed in his mind. Looking at the gravity of this situation, what can we do? Yi Shiwen asked. You can uncover that seal since those undead are now under the restraint, and you can take advantage of this opportunity to travel to the ominous mountain. But you will get only one chance. If you fail, that will be your end. The tomb slave said in a serious tone. But my offer is still valid. As long as you can uncover that seal, I will give you the right to my inheritance. You think about it while I will go inform the other human experts about the situation. Then the old man turned around and disappeared into the thin air. The insane level of his agility skill could literally shock the world. Just before leaving, he glanced at the wolf cub, then left from there. The other two looked at Yi Shiwen and asked, "What should we do now?" "I advise you to do what the old man said, because this is big trouble." The wolf cub suddenly spoke. Even if a part of the Zhou star array is broken, it is enough to become a door to unleash deadly creatures that have waited for so long to wreak havoc on this world. We have to do it, guys. There is no other way out. If what the senior said is true, then we will most likely die if we don't do something. Wu Shaochuan clenched his fist and said. If we don't act, we die. But if we take the risk and survive, we may get that inheritance he talked about. Yi Shuwen said, as even he could clearly see the hidden meaning in the old man's words, that they had no choice but to take up this task. Earlier, the old man had said that if Yi Shuwen and Mu Ling refused to take up the task, he would wait for another 50 years to pass on the task to another generation of geniuses, but now he seemed anxious, and it seemed like he really wanted them to take up this task and succeed. Yi Shuwen was no longer thinking about the inheritance because survival was a much bigger issue now. Come on then, there's no point in further discussion, let's go. Mu Ling said in a straightforward manner. The trio made the final decision and rushed in the direction of the huge ominous mountain of the undead. They were planning to do all they could in their power before the disaster would strike. But all of a sudden, Yi Shuwen was actually surprised when he saw the wolf cub following after them. The same wolf cub who tried several times to escape, was now silently following them on his own accord. Chapter 258, rushes all the way. 3 men and a wolf rushed all the way at an extremely fast speed and soon reached the huge ominous mountain. Although this mountain was visible from any part of the Demon Island, it was in fact located very far away in the depths of the island. Now, after arrived so close to the mountain, all they saw was a steady stream of demon beasts rushing to the mountain one after another. Even the Yellow River changed its course and was flowing towards the ominous mountain. The ghost soldiers were riding the mighty streams of Yellow River and all set to go on an expedition to the ominous mountain. This was really a frightening event. Innumerable tribal groups that consisted of various species of demon beasts which usually preferred to stay in hiding also showed up to be a part of this grand expedition. Not to mention, the mighty cavalry of ghost soldiers was also a part of this grand expedition, making the whole situation quite scary for human experts. Yi Shuwen was literally speechless when he looked at the raid being performed by demon beasts and ghost soldiers. Such an enormous and mighty army was enough to bring chaos throughout Zhenwujie. The sheer number of legendary realm warriors in this army was beyond imagination. Not to mention, this was just their strength after the decline of their influence over a span of thousands of years. Yi Shuwen simply could not imagine the extent of their original might when this influence was at its peak. The fearful shrieks of the undead creatures could be heard from far. Yi Shuwen condensed Jin Yuan in his eyes, and it seemed as if he suddenly opened a deva eye in the sky. Now, he could see from unimaginable far distances. From afar, he saw an endless army of skeleton monsters that were entirely enveloped in inexhaustible amounts of dead ki. There could be only one way to define these skeletons, terrifying creatures. It was easy to make a guess that they belonged to a mighty ancient influence, and at this time, an army of skeletons was rushing down the mountain. The terror-inducing sound of bones, rubbing against each other, was resounding throughout the sky and making the whole atmosphere even more frightening. Yi Shuwen witnessed how the army of skeletons severely clashed with the army of demon beast and vicious creatures on both sides. Began the most terror-inspiring battle. In moments, there were several casualties on both sides, but that didn't affect the battle at all. Beep! At this time, the golden-winged eagle arrived like a fighter jet, flapping its wings violently and shot several rounds of lasing beams on the skeleton army, sweeping clean a big stretch of area. However, the golden-winged eagle did not stop and continued to advance in the direction of the mountain of undead. On the rear side of skeleton army, there was an immense army of skeletons and zombies. And several zombie experts had unimaginable strength and cultivation levels. The zombie commander suddenly released his invincible imposing aura, thereby sweeping dead ki into the sky in the form of a column of light. As soon as this column of ominous light soared into the sky, it exploded and scattered the dark clouds in all directions. Yi Zaiwen's eyes opened wide as he saw this scene. He suddenly held his breath and simply couldn't believe his eyes. If skeletons were terrifying, then zombie experts were much more dreadful. And then there were also evil spirits waiting to wreak havoc on this world. Wu Shaochuan cursed out loud and said, "God damn it. I just hope that the Matrix method is still confining a major part of this undead army, otherwise, we are screwed." The roars of demon beasts, the roars of undead creatures, the rubbing sounds of bones, when interwoven together, the generated noise was extremely horrifying, enough to shake heaven and earth. The count of demon beasts kept on increasing since more and more demon beasts kept on joining the battle to stop the rampage of the undead army. The two sides were in a deadly deadlock which was essential to stop the undead army from destroying the entire island. It was like Armageddon, the whole island was trembling. It seemed as if the whole world would collapse as a result of this battle. Soon, the Yellow River also reached its destination and ghost soldiers joined the battle. The ghost cavalry reached directly from the oblique side and cut off the contact between skeletons and zombies. Although skeletons and zombies might have been extraordinary powerhouses when they were alive, but when confronted with the Yellow River, they immediately fell under the possession of evil spirits lurking in the yellow water, and this greatly lowered their spiritual strength. Some could no longer maintain their existence, screamed loudly and melted on the spot. It was a terrible war, enough to inspire terror in anyone. The dark sky was wreaking havoc on the island in the form of deadly rain that was capable of instantly corroding things. "Let's go, no matter what, we must cross the battlefield." Yi Shiwen took a deep breath and said. There was only one option at hand for not only their own survival but also for the safety of the entire world. Anyway, Tomb's slave told earlier that they could not leave this island, and if this undead army was allowed to go outside, then there was no point in leaving either, because the entire Zhenwujia would face destruction. The entire humanity might face annihilation, so they must find a way out of this mess. Hoo. Yi Zaiwen's extremely fast flight as he cut through the air produced a whistling sound that seemed to resemble a devil's cry. Yi Shiwen and the others rushed all the way and soon reached the intersection point between the two armies. The demon beast soldiers seemed to understand that Yi Shiwen and the others were here to help them. Not to mention, they were indulged in this battle and simply did not have time to attend to Yi Zaiwen's team. However, skeletons noticed them, and immediately, a formidable skeleton gave the order to his subordinates to attack. They immediately reacted by shooting a barrage of bone arrows towards Yi Shiwen and his team. Also, there was no lack of legendary realm skeletons among the attackers. "Get out of the way." Yi Shiwen bellowed, and his whole body was instantly covered by a golden cloak of divinities. The mighty divinities were burning wantonly around his body while also purifying the dead ki in his surroundings. This decreased the intensity of howling of innumerable souls that were filled with resentment. The long blade danced in his hands and released a dazzling blade light that instantly formed a curtain of blade shadows and blocked the incoming bone arrows, chopping and crushing several of them to bits almost instantly. Mu Ling and Wu Shaochuan also resorted to their secret techniques to block the incoming barrage of bone arrows. Then there came a shrill cry and a formidable-looking skeleton took out a bone arrow, aimed at Yi Shiwen and shot. The arrow pierced through the space and almost instantly arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. Almost at that moment, a terrible light flashed in the sky and the bone arrow instantly disintegrated under its enormous might. Then the golden light further proceeded and crashed into that skeleton, crushing him instantly. Yi Shiwen looked up and saw the giant stature of golden-winged eagle in the distance. It did not stop and once again continued to slaughter undead soldiers. Apparently, it did this to protect Yi Shiwen and his friends. The trio and the wolf cub continued to move forward, but more cautiously. This time, they were fortunate enough to receive help from the golden-winged eagle, otherwise, things could have become messy. They went forward all the way, only to find many experts in the distance. They had also taken advantage of the commotion and arrived here to participate in this battle. It seemed like they had also been persuaded by the tomb slave. In short, they knew that if they did not go all out now, then there was a possibility of a great disaster that would eventually bring death to all. Therefore, they chose to struggle for survival rather than waiting for death. Yi Shiwen's team also joined the team of experts. This team was being led by Emperor Chen, only this time, he was sitting upon a golden lion. He appeared majestic, just like the true emperor of this world. Emperor Chen's imposing aura swept over in all directions. He turned his head and saw Yi Shiwen flying towards his team. He snorted but did not take the opportunity to attack Yi Shiwen, because he was clearly aware of the severity of the situation. He ignored the presence of Yi Shiwen and urged the Golden Lion, thereby flying all the way forward. Qing Su could also be seen following Emperor Chen, and his aura was no worse than Emperor Chen's. With just a flick of his hand, a blue beam appeared out of nowhere and swept skeletons out of his path. Qing Su was riding a beautiful yellow crane and appeared just like an immortal being. There were several familiar faces on this team, such as Ji Moon could be seen standing on her butterfly lizard, Warhawk was also riding his golden-winged eagle, and Wang Purple was also present. These four formidable experts were guarding the four sides of the team formation with all other human experts inside the formation. Mu Yuran and Jian Wuchen were no longer injured and had come to participate as well. In addition, several other strong experts of the 10 countries of the Southeast region had also arrived, with some being at Truth's 7th or 8th stage while some being only at Truth 4th or 5th stage. The island's best human experts had already arrived to participate in this battle for their survival. But at this time, the smell of blood spread all over, the sky turned red and began to pour blood everywhere, almost as if the heaven was crying tears of blood. It's the infamous blood rain, so terrible. An expert said when he was drenched in the blood rain and felt his body getting heavy, to the extent that he was unable to take even a single step forward. Tianyuan Mirror. Yi Shiwen shouted and Tianyuan Mirror flew out into the sky and released a curtain of scarlet light that immediately acted as a shelter against the blood rain. However, when the blood rain fell on the scarlet shelter, it instead became a source of nourishment for the mirror. Ha ha ha. Yi Mo gave out a carefree laughter because this blood rain was simply like a nourishing shower for him and Tianyuan Mirror. This shower of blood was made up of evaporated blood and essence of demon beast soldiers as they were being slaughtered by undead soldiers. For most people, this blood rain was like a curse and very hard to deal with. In fact, it could even kill formidable experts if proper protection was not used, but Tianyuan Mirror directly erased the curse and absorbed blood and essence out of it. This was the reason why Tianyuan Mirror was getting brighter, as it was constantly absorbing blood and essence of killed demon beasts. The scarlet light released by the mirror almost camouflaged the surrounding sky. At this time, Tianyuan Mirror flew high into the sky, got bigger and bigger, covering a very wide area, and the blood rain was directly absorbed by the scarlet red mirror. The experts cupped their hands and showed gratitude to Yi Shiwen. If Yi Shiwen had not acted at the critical moment, then they would have faced extreme difficulties in dealing with this blood rain. They felt like throwing up due to the repugnant smell of blood emanating from the blood rain. This was the time when everyone needed unity and cooperation. Yi Shiwen was not stingy and openly lent them a hand, not to mention, it also allowed Tianyuan Mirror to reap great benefits. In any event, Yi Shiwen made the right decision. Only Emperor Chen looked coldly at Yi Shiwen. He neither appreciated Yi Ziwen's strength nor the kindness rendered by him. He certainly was not afraid of this blood rain and continued to defend the front line. Chapter 259, Struggle on the Ominous Mountain. Only Emperor Chen looked coldly at Yi Shiwen. He neither appreciated Yi Ziwen's strength nor the kindness rendered by him. He certainly was not afraid of this blood rain and rushed toward the front line on his golden lion. Under the crazy shower of blood, the team of experts was enjoying full protection of Yi Ziwen's Tianyuan Mirror. After successfully bypassing the skeleton army, they bumped into the mighty army of zombies. These horrifying zombies were continuously gushing out from the gap in the matrix method. Yi Shiwen and the others did not stop there and flew all the way, only to find a flaming bird in the distance that was constantly sweeping clean an area with its immortal flames which could burn the world itself. The team of experts rushed through the flaming area and reached so close to the ominous mountain for the first time. They saw a mighty team of undead, mainly consisting of high-ranked zombies, rushing down from the mountain. The most unusual scenery that greeted human experts was when they looked into the matrix method and actually saw a variety of palace buildings on the mountain peak. Yes, an entire complex of ancient architecture with lots of crowded buildings covering the entire mountain area inside the matrix formation. This should be the headquarters of the ancient mighty influence that initially ruled this island. Almost all of them are made up of rare materials. Emo said. And considering how old a being he was, the amount of experience he possessed was not something Yishuan could comprehend. Only after searching in several dimensions, one can find so many rare building materials. Most of these materials do not occur in this world. I must say that these buildings are more extravagant than Devil King's palace. Everyone was shocked after witnessing this endless complex of ancient architectural masterpiece. Built with an amazing combination of gold and jade and some strange materials, never seen before. However, right now, these buildings were acting as a breeding nest for a variety of zombies and evil spirits that were continuously coming out of the palace buildings. There was no end to this undead army, and after watching this scene, human experts felt chills down their spines. In Yi Zaiwen's mind, abruptly, the ancient seal characters cropped up. The same seal characters he had seen earlier in the ruins of an ancient civilization. That time, he was sucked into a scary illusion. He couldn't help but remember the same illusion once again. Boom! Boom! Numerous electric snakes could be seen creeping in the black clouds and a terrifying thunder struck the palace. The palace couldn't withstand the enormous destructive power contained in the thunder strike and crumbled down. I am here, now come out. Suddenly, a majestic voice resounded in all directions, buzz. The low and dull muffled sound of a bell resounded and instantly sent out numerous sonic waves everywhere, while several electric snakes could be seen lurking in the dark cloud, and seemed all prepared to bring down chaos in this world. Get lost! Accompanied by a loud shout, a few 100 feet wide pillar of golden light went straight into the sky and dispersed the dark thundering clouds. As the voice fell, a middle-aged man flew out of the wreckage of palace and coldly looked towards the sky. He had a dignified bearing and was clad in a golden-colored emperor's robe. In the sky, the scattered clouds suddenly agglutinated again and revealed a huge glowing eye in the center. If you dare to go against the heaven's will, you cannot do that without a fight. A muffled voice echoed everywhere. And a huge lightning maliciously struck. Wasn't the illusion based on this location? Though it looked somewhat different after having undergone corrosion for thousands of years, Yishuan still managed to recognize this place in one glance. Or, the entire island was perhaps the background in this scene and not just this part of the ominous mountain of the undead. Right after entering the matrix method, human experts immediately felt a terrible pressure upon their bodies. They felt as if they would be crushed under this pressure. The strange force suddenly fell down from the sky and pushed them to the ground. Now they had no means to fly inside the matrix formation. Certainly, there were some exceptions like Yishuan with his golden devil wings, Warhawk riding his pet golden-winged eagle, Ji-Moon riding her butterfly lizard and Ching Su riding his yellow crane. After all, even if human experts were unable to use various techniques to fly, the ones with wings would naturally be able to fly in the air. The terrifying shrieks were resounding everywhere and the whole scene was truly fear-inspiring. Watching the steady stream of zombies coming out of the palace buildings, everyone felt as if they had stepped in a zombie nest. Otherwise, how could there be hundreds of thousands of zombies in one place? I think this place is an ancient battlefield. All these zombies are clad in iron armors, armed with spears. It is clear that they used to be war soldiers who have now transformed into zombies. You are right, it's too terrifying. I also thought the same thing, and this place seems like the lair of a formidable ancient civilization. And it seems like they were attacked by some even more formidable force that led to countless casualties, which eventually led to the birth of these zombies. What kind of formidable force can destroy such a fearful influence, causing so many casualties? This is unbelievably shocking. Anyway, we have to uncover the seal, otherwise, we certainly will not have any way out of this mess. An expert said in a loud voice and was heard by all other experts. This worked as a spark to help them recover from their shocked states. They also began to think about the most vital point: if they did not do their best, then there was only a dead end waiting for them. At this time, the Matrix method began to revolve, and even though some formidable zombies and skeletons were constantly attacking the gap, desperately trying to widen it and ultimately destroy the entire Matrix method, but the Matrix method, despite having a gap, was intrepid and sparkling across the sky. In the sky, the stars were twinkling like never before, and as if announcing the incoming of an apocalypse. And suddenly, a huge beam of light detached itself from the Matrix formation and severely pounded on the ground, smashing many zombies and skeletons into minced meat. Zhou Star Matrix Method. The wolf cub opened its mouth wide and spelled out the name of this Matrix method. The energy of the stars was condensed by the Matrix formation, transforming into a huge dragon tail, and severely hit the ground. Taking advantage of this situation, the team of human experts rushed forward. Even if they could not fly, they were still advancing at extremely high speeds. The huge palace-like buildings were connected with each other and were positioned as sections of ladders, one after another, while going up towards the mountain peak. The experts crossed the buildings one after another and continued to climb up, while also encountering many zombies and skeletons on the way. They did not stop to engage the undead soldiers and continued to advance forward at maximum speed. They could not afford to waste any time and needed to stop the advancement of Thundead army into the Demon Island. The experts were getting agitated but did not dare to stay to fight with undead soldiers, because staying behind was no different than dying a brutal death. Aaa. Aaa. Several pitiful screams echoed when experts were passing through a palace and were suddenly attacked by two pairs of jaw bones as they directly dashed into the crowd of human experts and caught several experts at once. There came miserable cries along with spooky bone-rubbing sounds, as if the flesh was being chewed directly from the bodies of people who were still alive and screaming. All of the experts who managed to evade this attack looked at each other with eyes filled with horror. After all, this was not something they witnessed every day. Now everyone knew how important it was to reach the summit as soon as possible and open the seal, then only they could stop this nightmare. But this was something that has never been accomplished by anyone in the past thousands of years. No one had ever succeeded in taking off the seal, but they had no choice but to do it. They could only choose to go forward while temporarily ignoring the loss of their comrades. Of course, retreat was not an option. We must hurry, but we must be careful not to go near those palaces. At this time, Ching Su, who was riding a yellow crane, shouted from the sky and warned everyone. Yes, charge forward in order to survive. All experts were encouraged by this and rushed forward. Those palaces were extremely frightening and were being guarded by frightening monsters. They encountered much more terrifying monsters as they continued to get closer to the summit. By the time they reached halfway up towards their destination, almost half of their team had been sacrificed, leaving less than 500 experts. This was no ordinary loss, and especially for the southeast region that lost so many of its super elites. Most of the weaker human experts were eaten by the zombies, but the rest of the team did not stop to help them. This was certainly a heartless thing to do, but they had to endure it, because if they had stopped to help others, then everyone would have died. There were several palace monsters who almost came close to single-handedly wipe out the entire team of experts. A rotting monster suddenly came out of a palace and chased after them, but the saving grace came as a fact that it was somehow bound to the palace and couldn't go past a certain limit. However, it still managed to drag away several experts and ate them. These experts had never experienced such a terrible place in their entire life. They were the so-called lucky and pampered geniuses of the southeast region who never had to face life-threatening situations to grow stronger, so this situation was pretty much of a disaster for them. Gradually, as they continued to climb up, the number of zombies reduced considerably, but their strength grew enough to compensate. They also bumped into a half-step legendary level zombie that was immediately engaged by Ching Su and Emperor Chen. But, their combined strength was not enough to deal with it. The gap between Truth 9th stage and half-step legendary realm was too large. But, fortunately, that zombie had spent more than a millennium and seemed to possess limited strength. Hence, after a while, it was overpowered by the team of human experts. Afterward, they slowly approached the summit. They had started to feel tired, but the great responsibility upon their shoulders was what boosting their morale and pushing them to try harder and achieve their goal. Chapter 260, If I cannot do it, you all will die. Only Emperor Chen, Qing Su, and Yi Shiwen were able to keep a straight face in such a dire situation. Other experts, including Warhawk, looked extremely exhausted. Some experts had their bodies completely soaked in sweat and were on the verge of collapse. Some were showing signs of breathing trouble while sustaining terrible suppression inside the Zhou star matrix formation. Come on everyone, we are quickly nearing the pinnacle. Qing Su shouted. But at this time, the team of experts saw two zombies of half-step legendary realm pacing towards them from far behind. The crowd called out in alarm. They were scared and definitely not prepared to withstand such a toss. After all, one such zombie of half-step legendary realm had exhausted them to such a pitiful state, then how could they even considering dealing with two of them simultaneously? What should we do now? There are two of them, coming after us. I don't want to die after getting so close to our destination. Their goal was so close, but the boost in their morale did not survive long after the sudden appearance of two zombies of half-step legendary realm. Originally, they never thought much about half-step legendary realm as their target was always the legendary realm. Half-step legendary realm was just a milestone in between, and being peerless geniuses, they never had a doubt about not reaching this realm. It was only a matter of time for them. However, after dealing with that last zombie, they came to realize that they were highly mistaken to have underestimated the half-step legendary realm. After all, even if Emperor Chen and Qing Su were at the peak of truth 9th realm, together they could not defeat one zombie of half-step legendary realm. But fortunately, these two zombies should have been weakened too like the previous one, otherwise, despair would be the only thing awaiting them. Let me deal with this. At this time, Yi Shiwen stepped forward and said. Everyone was astonished and looked at Yi Shiwen as it took more than just courage to dare and make such a statement. Yi Shiwen, have you gone out of your mind? Wu Shaochuan quickly said. Let me explain, these two zombies were obviously partners when they were alive, it is easy to infer that from their actions. So, if they join forces and attack together then we are doomed. It will be impossible to block their joint raid, so the best way is to divert one of them. Yi Shiwen said and everyone nodded. His talent was not unknown to everyone, and regardless of his strength and level, he was still an elite peerless genius who just now made a valid point. However, everyone knew that distracting a zombie of half-step legendary realm would not be an easy task for one guy. This was a suicidal plan and would lead to certain death, but nobody wanted to die, making things more complicated and confusing. But Yi Shiwen willingly accepted to take up this risky position, which was quite shocking for everyone. If the strength is too weak for the job, then even if one of us managed to distract a zombie, it will be pointless as that person will be killed in an instant. And then the zombie will turn back to reunite with its partner. Yi Shiwen said. Therefore only a few people are fit for this task. Everyone nodded, though there were a lot of people who were not willing to take such a risk, but at this time, all had to admit that it was indeed not possible for most people to successfully perform this task, honestly because they lacked required qualifications to do so. These people knew that even the strongest and most talented Emperor Chen was not daring to take up the task, since even he would admit that he did not have such capability to single-handedly stop a zombie. But why did Yi Shiwen came up with this idea, and why was he willing to take such a risk? Everyone was confused, especially Mu Ling and Wu Shaochuan, as they were anxiously looking at Yi Shiwen and trying to understand what was going on in his mind. Why was he looking for death? However, I am the most appropriate one for the job. Yi Shiwen said, a zombie's most vital advantage is not martial arts, but its body, which is much more formidable than demon beasts of the same level. Right now, your martial strength is limited due to suppression, but I am not affected because my body is strong enough to constrain a zombie. Yi Shiwen certainly hadn't made this decision in a heat of the moment. It was a well-thought-out plan and he needed to be careful to make it work. They did not have the option to make a U-turn and get out of there. Yishuan made this decision, keeping survival a top priority since he was willing to face the situation at hand without succumbing to escapism. Moreover, right now, the formidable powers of these zombies were limited according to what the tomb slave said. Not to forget that they were still more powerful than experts of truth 9th stage. It was said that when gilded tyrant form would be practiced to the perfection level, then the practitioner should be able to tear apart mythical beings like gods and devils with bare hands. Although Yi Zaiwen's practice had not yet reached such a high level, however, a zombie of half-step legendary realm was also not a mythical being. Only Yishuan with his gilded tyrant body could contend with a zombie, while others simply did not stand a chance when fighting alone. Yishuan knew that this was going to be a tough battle with unpredictable outcomes and there was a chance that he might get killed, but he had no choice, because if these two zombies attacked together then everyone was bound to die, including him. Only I can do this. And remember one thing. If I don't succeed then you all will die for sure. Yi Zaiwen's expression was blunt but his words showed his boldness and confidence, to the extent that even his rivals suddenly began to feel that he was quite pleasing to the eyes. Wu Shaochuan and Mu Ling tried again and again to persuade Yishuan, but he had already made up his mind. Moreover, even these two understood that this was not only the best choice available to them but also the most reliable choice. If Yishuan stayed with rest of the team and the other zombies attacked, then the entire team would face instant annihilation. Yishuan rushed forward, and at the same time, his whole body was enveloped in a golden cloak. From afar, he appeared just like a golden god of war, a powerful being with extraordinary powers. He seemed out of place in this dark environment, as if a golden god woke up just now from the chaos in order to eradicate the chaos with his own hands. Yishuan opened his devil wings and instantly flew towards the zombies while simultaneously thrusting his palm to shoot dragon chi towards a zombie. Boom! The dragon chi severely crashed into that zombie's body and it started roaring again and again due to intense pain caused by this attack. At this time, the other zombie suddenly jumped towards Yishuan and started chasing him. Yishuan had succeeded in his plan. Now, he turned around and flew all the way towards the mountain forest to lure the pursuing zombie into that forest. After luring it far into the forest, Yishuan stopped and retracted his wings. When the zombie saw him stopping, it suddenly got excited and went towards Yishuan. Its skinny claws stretched out to grasp him. The zombie was using tiger claw style to grasp Yishuan to death. Yishuan knew this and certainly would not let this happen. Since his whole body was already enveloped in a golden cloak, it was safe to say that gilded tyrant form was acting at its best. He shouted and thrust both his palms towards the incoming claws. His palms transformed into dragon claws, displaying the incomparable might of coiling dragon palm. One must know that coiling dragon palm was an ancient martial technique and it was very difficult for an ordinary expert to comprehend it. Some disciples had tried in the past but had lost their mind and soul as a result. Not to mention, Yishuan also had to face a similar problem and its mastery was fairly difficult for him, unless he would comprehend it to an extraordinary extent. However, Yishuan actually managed to reach such an extent but not by learning from others. He relied on his own insight that he obtained inside the mysterious space to comprehend coiling dragon palm in his own way. He could still see the figure of an indomitable spirit of a man that was constantly practicing coiling dragon palm in his mind. Yishuan had spent a lot of time in the mysterious space to get insights about how to practice and implement it, but rather than copying that figure, he comprehended this technique in his own way to get better results, excluding the move sets he did not need and adding the ones he might need to improve the technique. Yishuan applied this kind of learning, comprehending and improving method on all techniques. So, he was always able to improve a technique to increase its power and decrease the difficulty of using it in an actual combat. Boom! The bone claws and coiling dragon claws severely collided with each other. It seemed as if the resulting explosion was caused by atomic collisions in general. This was a terrible collision and the shock waves caused as a result swept across in all directions and wiped out a major section of the forest. Yishuan had to retreat several steps and he felt his chest tightening as a result. Even though he was protected by his gilded tyrant body, he still felt as if his body would fall apart. This zombie's body was really intrepid, unlike its skinny appearance. Other experts would have been torn apart by its claws, so the only saving grace, this time, was his golden tyrant body. Otherwise, even an expert of truth 9th stage would not stand a chance. Yi Shiwen was able to contend because the fighting styles of both him and the zombie relied on their respective formidable bodies. Chapter 261, Deathmatch with a Half-Step Legendary Zombie. This fight was certainly not going to be an easy one for Yi Shiwen. Even though the zombie was under suppression, it was still more powerful and had a much stronger body than him in comparison. So, in the end, Yi Shiwen did not hold a single advantage against it. But this did not mean that Yi Ziwen's gilded tyrant form was utterly useless. He could take on the zombie by relying on the tyrannical defense of his golden body, but his inferior cultivation level was not at all a help. His battle strength was comparable to Truth 9th stage, and the gap between 9th stage and half-step legendary realm was too difficult to surmount. Zombies were infamous for their terrifying bodies in all of the 10,000 worlds. And the body of a zombie of half-step legendary level was easily going to have an iron threshold. Yes, there were thresholds above the iron threshold such as copper threshold, silver threshold, golden threshold, etc. It was said that a zombie with golden threshold could actually contend with mythical creatures. Although this zombie had not yet fully entered the iron threshold phase, its body was still formidable when taken in Yi Ziwen's perspective. Because Yi Shiwen still hadn't fully reached the true potential of gilded tyrant form due to his lack of level, as he was still in truth realm and he would require the understanding of legendary realm to perfect it. Fortunately, that zombie's power was suppressed, or else Yi Shiwen wouldn't stand a chance. Even so, Yi Shiwen would have to participate in a deadly battle for survival. Yi Shiwen and the zombie fiercely clashed, and so did their tyrannical bodies, sweeping away anything in the past in the form a horrifying explosion in the forest. Yi Ziwen's golden body couldn't block the entirety of attack force and traces if blood appeared from the corners of his mouth. Yi Shiwen was dedicated to his cause and was willing to face much worse for its sake. He had no alternative, and if he did not do his best then everyone would be slaughtered, including his friends. Moreover, if everyone died then who would complete the task? Therefore, Yi Shiwen had to bite the bullet and once again move forward to engage in battle. Yi Shiwen seemed prepared to do his best and go all out. Shua! 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 He immediately took out Poisonous Dragon Water Control Flag Array and summoned Deepwater Black Snake King with the combined soul power of 19 Deepwater Black Snakes. The humongous beast instantly surrounded the zombie and kept on roaring, seemingly all prepared to attack at any time. However, the zombie immediately used its fists and kicks and gave several blows to the Deepwater Black Snake King. The Deepwater Black Serpent King's overall power had reached merely the 9th layer of Truth Realm and was only one step away from becoming a water dragon, but it was still knocked out like a stray dog. Yi Shiwen had predicted this outcome and was only using the power of the flag array to encircle the zombie and keep it distracted. Anyway, Deepwater Black Snake King was just a collection of energy, so Yi Shiwen was not afraid of its safety. Moreover, Deepwater Black Snake King used to be at half-step legendary realm when he was alive and would soon transform into a water dragon, becoming a valuable addition to his arsenal. Although after death, its power had greatly reduced, but the zombie's true power was also under suppression. If not alone, perhaps together they could thwart this zombie. The Deepwater Black Snake King restructured its disintegrated body and once again attacked the zombie. Yi Shiwen took this opportunity to use Phoenix regeneration to restore his injuries. In a matter of few breaths, his condition was restored to peak condition and he did not waste any time and immediately rushed towards the zombie to collaborate with Flag Array. Yi Shiwen had nurtured Flag Array exactly for situations like this. It was like his last card to deal with opponents at much higher level. He did not need to use it against the two tyrants because he himself was enough to deal with them, plus his pride did not allow him to use Flag Array to beat those two. Even after keeping in mind the large disparity between Truth 9th Stage and Half-Step Legendary Realm, Yishuan knew that Flag Array could work very well for distracting an opponent, giving him enough time for strategizing and healing. With the help of this divine tool, he was confident that he could constrain and perhaps even kill this zombie. Yishuan was not a fool and was not just fully depending on the Flag Array's distraction ability. In the end, he would have to wait patiently for the right time and personally act, using his golden Bodhi's invincible strength, to defeat the zombie. One must know that this zombie's one punch could kill an expert of Truth 9th layer, therefore, so far, Yishuan had been acting cautiously and must continue to do so. For Yishuan, this was a rare experience of fighting with a warrior of half-step legendary realm. Yishuan was going to obtain enormous benefit from this battle. Tianyuan Mirror! Yishuan shouted loudly. Tianyuan Mirror suddenly appeared out of nowhere and released a deep scarlet light that enveloped his body. Some of it penetrated into his body and merged with his flesh and blood, considerably raising his strength a notch. Yishuan, this is an excellent opportunity. Kill this zombie and take its core Dan. It will drastically improve your cultivation level, and that too in a very short time. Emo was standing on Yizaiwan's shoulder as he gave his suggestion in a very excited manner. In reality, Yizaiwan's inner state was still at Truth 7th Stage, and the zombie, despite being suppressed, was at half-step legendary realm, so its core Dan, when consumed, would be sufficient to help him have a breakthrough in a very short time. Then he would step into Truth 8th Stage and his battle strength would reach half-step legendary realm, if not directly reaching the legendary realm. But, after reaching the peak of Truth 9th layer, his fighting strength would actually reach legendary realm. At that time, he would have easily surpassed Emperor Chen and the others, thereby standing at the top of the younger generation of the Southeast region. Even while counting the top experts of the previous generation, he would still be considered at the top. For others, a zombie's core Dan, also called Zombie Dan, was a deadly poisonous drug, but that was not the case for Yishuan because his Tianyuan mirror could purify drugs, even the poisonous ones, and transform them into nourishing drugs. But anyway, he must first kill this tyrannical zombie to obtain its core. Yishuan used his hands to tear a golden arc of light and shot it at the zombie. It seemed as if space itself had been torn to welcome the golden arc of light from another world, and all must submit in front of the glory of this endless divine beam of light from another worldly source. The zombie shot its palm and its fingernails turned in a frightening claw, like an iron hook, which quickly approached Yishuan to trap his neck. The iron hook claw was a secret technique used by zombies, and it was considered a very frightening technique. Boom! The two sides clashed almost at the same time. Yizaiwan's golden body with God's defense, when coupled with the defense granted by Tianyuan Mirror, was finally able to compensate the gap. As soon as the two tyrannical beings collided, it seemed like the entire world would collapse. Bang! The terrible force generated in the explosion sent both of them flying in opposite directions. In the zombie's hand, a terrible crack opened up in its tough flesh and purple blood oozed out and spattered on the ground. The blood was extremely toxic and corrosive and instantly began to corrode the ground upon contact. But Yishuan was also not in a good shape. His gilded tyrant form disappeared all of a sudden and his red blood splashed out while also containing traces of golden threads. The ominous and vindictive color got stronger in the zombie's eyes. It roared again and once again ran towards Yishuan. Yishuan did not waste time and fully concentrated on using Phoenix regeneration to repair his wound. Soon, his inner state was restored to its peak. He glanced at the zombie that was crazily running towards him, and he also immediately rushed forward to greet the incoming attack. Both sides were tyrannical, outrageously powerful, and their battle was based on the direct clash of bodies. Especially, there was an ever-increasing burning rage in the zombie's green eyes, as if it despised the very existence of this world and wouldn't stop before it would bring upon death to this world. Yishuan looked calm and tranquil, just a crack in his flesh could not make him blink an eye. Phoenix regeneration technique was very magical and once again restored him to a perfect state. He once again shot and released a coiling dragon almost instantly. The coiling dragon looked upward and gave out a long and loud roar. Its roar was like a thunderclap, and at the same time, mighty dragon chi spread everywhere and restrained Inchi and Deadki which were overflowing in the vicinity. It was like a terrible explosion of light. The epitome of positive energy. The banisher of evil spirits. Yishuan used coiling dragon palm, and suddenly, the entire world lost its color. As if only the coiling dragon existed in the world and nothing else. The coiling dragon rushed towards the zombie and attacked it with its claws. Yishuan also claimed a shot at the same time, but in that zombie's eyes, instead of seeing a panic-stricken look, he saw a rather calm look. Just like demon beasts, it was not easy for zombies to gain wisdom and intelligence. Their very existence was not tolerated in the world and was basically called a blasphemous existence. The world law that was exploited for making zombies was also considered one of the most blasphemous laws in the world. Zombies just followed instincts and worked on the leftover instincts from when they were alive. But there were some extremely powerful zombies who still had an opportunity to develop wisdom. Yishuan was facing a zombie that had not yet fully reached legendary realm. It was certainly better than ordinary zombies that followed only instincts, but it was also far from obtaining a complicated thinking ability. Its wisdom was very limited and his intelligence had only slightly gotten rid of the so-called instinct-driven thought process. This was a bitter fight and both sides were trying their best to eliminate the opponent as soon as possible. Each of their clashes was world-shattering and causing destruction in the surrounding areas. The battle had reached the phase in which blood was splashing in all directions. Sometimes, they were colliding in the mid-air and causing havoc in the forest area that had now simply been reduced to a wasteland. The zombie fiercely dashed towards Yishuan like a bulldozer. The coiling dragon soared in the sky and fiercely strangled the zombie. It seemed as if the coiling dragon had come on a punitive expedition, however, even so, even after using various methods, there were still some disparities between the powers of the zombie and Yishuan. Chapter 262, Slaughtered Zombie. It was a brutal contest of resilience and toughness among the two tyrannical masters. Once again, a mighty explosion occurred and blasted both of them in opposite directions. Both of them had their skins peeled off and blood oozing out of their wounds, but none of the two was willing to stop fighting. For a zombie, its body itself was the most powerful weapon. A zombie did not feel pain and wouldn't stop rampaging, even when its limbs were torn off or its head was severed from its body, because right after transforming into a zombie, its body was occupied by evil spirits, ending up making the whole corpse just a tool. So even if the head was severed from a zombie's body, other body parts would still continue to move because a zombie's body was not controlled by its brain but by the evil spirits. The zombie did not stop even when it was seriously injured in the last attack and immediately rushed towards Yishuan. Meanwhile, Yishuan was standing like a mountain while an endless amount of imposing aura was gushing out of his body, making him appear like a mighty god of war. Phoenix regeneration was working non-stop to heal his injuries and restore his inner state to its max, and in a short time, he was back to his peak condition. Yishuan also did not care about the injuries since Phoenix regeneration was the biggest advantage he held, and by relying on it, he could always continue to maintain his present tyrannical battle efficiency. And even if that zombie did not care about its injuries, it still could not stop a gradual decrement in its battle efficiency as it was constantly running amok and wasting energy. So, a long battle would actually be more favorable for Yishuan because even a zombie of half-step legendary realm could be slowly exhausted to death. Although Yishuan would have to consume a lot of his life essence and vitality, he refused to give up, otherwise, only a dead end would greet him if he was unwilling to make decisive sacrifices whenever needed. Retreat was not an option, it certainly wasn't an option. Roar! The zombie lifted its face upwards, roared and released its poisonous chi in the surrounding area. Being a zombie, it was fully detached from reincarnation cycle, and just like a monster from hell, it released an ominous imposing aura, breaking the shackles of the world and swept across in all directions. Yishuan seemed all prepared to face the fury of this zombie. Yishuan also roared and there exploded a dazzling divine light from within his clothes as if to conquer the entire universe and subdue the heavens. The battle had entered its final phase, and it did not seem like this battle was going on between a human and a zombie, but between two legendary beings, belonging to two different universes. It had mostly been a contest between two invincible bodies, but the extent of this battle had not yet reached the most tragic state. Much worse was about to come. The zombie's green eyes were flashing fiercely, and it waved its fists in a strange manner to display zombie-specific martial art that derived chi from its arteries. Yishuan also went all out and used Coiling Dragon Palm to summon a huge coiling dragon. It gave out a long and loud cry and soared into the sky, wantonly dancing, and it seemed like the whole belonged to it, now. As if a real legendary dragon had come out of the fables to dominate the entire world. The coiling dragon's very presence was suppressing Inchi and Deadki in the atmosphere. Bang! The battle had entered an extremely frigid phase, and suddenly, Yizaiwan's chest was penetrated by the zombie's sharp iron claws. And the very next instant, the zombie retracted its claws and tore off a big chunk of flesh and meat from his chest. But things did not go well for the zombie as well. Its whole body was nipped by the coiling dragon, and as a result of that, its bones were now visible through the several wounds spread all over its body. Yizaiwan's golden defense had been broken by the zombie's iron claws, and a fatal wound could be seen oozing blood from his chest area. But at the same time, his wound was also healing at an incredibly fast speed, and within a few breaths' time, he was back to normal. Of course, there was no trace of any wound on his chest region, and he was once again at his peak condition. Boom! Both sides severely clashed again and caused a massive explosion in the sky, resulting in a burst of dazzling golden light and splashing blood in all directions. Rumble! Rumble! Yishuan noticed that each time the zombie attacked with its claws, it drew the power of world laws and invoked suppression upon him as a result of the fluctuations in world laws. One must know that suppression effect of world laws was applicable only to the experts of Truth Realm and below, because it was extremely difficult for them to comprehend world laws, and they easily succumbed under their might, in turn facing an overwhelming suppression. This was actually the biggest difference between an expert at Truth 9th Peak and an expert at Half-Step Legendary Realm. It was very difficult to comprehend world laws, and that was the reason why only a small numbers of experts entered into the Half-Step Legendary Realm. Even in the younger generation, only a handful of experts, below the age of 150 years, were able to step into Half-Step Legendary Realm, but there were many experts at Truth 9th stage in comparison. Although there were several legendary level experts in Yuan school, but that was the result of 1,000 years of accumulation. And considering the fact that there had been millions of disciples in the history of Yuan school, there were only a few dozen disciples who had managed to step into the legendary realm. So, one could see that legendary experts were quite rare existences. There were not more than 200 legendary experts in the entire Great U state, and that 2 out of tens of billions of people. So, one could understand how difficult it really was to step into the legendary realm. A legendary level expert was capable of invoking complete suppression. When considering the elites from all of the 10 countries of Southeast region, there were only 20 to 30 people who had managed to achieve the legendary realm before reaching the age of 150. This meant that on an average, only 2 to 3 people per country were able to achieve such a feat. Chi Fifan was one such example, as he was able to reach half-step legendary realm at a young age. So even if there were hundreds of true disciples at Truth 9th stage, some being at the peak of Truth 9th stage, but even so, they were still considered nothing in front of the 4 pro disciples. This was a crucial step, and if this step was taken within a short period of time, then it would directly determine their future success. If an ordinary expert was facing such law fluctuations which were being orchestrated by the zombie, then that expert would have been in an utterly miserable state by now. But thankfully, Yishuan had also comprehended a section of the law debris. The depth of his comprehension was not comparable to that of the zombie, but was enough to offset the suppression effect that was being caused by the fluctuations in world laws. Heaven and earth seemed to have lost their luster in front of the tyrannical battle going on between these two monsters. Spiraling energies were spreading in all directions. Thundering explosions and shock waves had reduced this entire forest area to a wasteland. Yishuan was not at all worried, on the contrary, he was very excited to have come across such a rare opportunity to experience fighting with a higher-level tyrannical monster, a monster that possessed an invincible body just like him. Perhaps he had a subconscious lust for violent and bloody battles and he himself was unaware about that. The zombie was getting injured again and again while Yishuan continued to remain at his peak condition thanks to Phoenix regeneration. With the help of this technique, he could repeatedly challenge opponents of much higher level than his own. Not to mention, he could also participate in deadly battles without worrying about getting seriously injured. He dared to challenge a tyrannical opponent not just to sharpen his own skills but also to obtain the biggest advantage in the form of battle experience and also in the form of an invincible confidence level. Most people, even the so-called peerless geniuses, were afraid to do so, but Yishuan dared to take this risk thanks to Phoenix regeneration. If anyone could see this battle, they would surely feel frightened to no limit. The zombie had slowly started to lose its advantage over Yishuan because it was getting tired and was taking a lot of damage. Although Yishuan was at his peak condition, he still could not hide his pale complexion. This was the consequence of overusing his life essence. Even his golden defense wasn't able to cover up his pale complexion. In other words, Yishuan was burning his own life energy for the sake of winning this battle. Everyone cherished their lives, after all, their lifespan was limited and no one wanted to consume their own lifespan and die early because time was very crucial to cultivate and step into next realm in order to increase the lifespan. However, Yishuan was not afraid of losing several years from his lifespan. In just a few years' time, he had reached Truth's 7th stage all the way from Hotian 3rd stage. It could be said that his cultivation speed was insanely fast, and so unlike others, he did not need to spend a lot of years to step into the legendary realm in order to obtain a huge lifespan. Moreover, he always thought that life was not for saving up. People must fearlessly move forward and live the way they want. The zombie roared and its helmet and armor suddenly shattered into pieces. When it was alive, it used to be a general and had fought for countless years, killing countless enemies in his career. So far, the battle was stuck in a tie, but one thing was clear, that it was not going to resign in front of Yishuan. The zombie blasted a punch and swept away an endless amount of poisonous dead ki towards Yishuan. He noticed that the golden defense had started to melt due to its corrosive effect. Looks like I do not need to retrograde today to cut down a legend. Yishuan said in his heart and finally began to go all out without any restraint. He immediately used coiling dragon palm and an endless amount of dragon chi, combined with golden divinities, collided with the zombie's attack in midair, and the resulting explosion was so vast that it camouflaged the entire sky. Suddenly, the ground cracked open when a massive sword intention condensed in his hand. Yishuan had also embedded golden divinities into this sword intention. This terrifying golden sword intention was capable of killing demons, devils, ghosts, goblins, and all sorts of creatures in one fell swoop. Yishuan stared coldly at the zombie. The coiling dragon was roaring again and again. At this time, Yishuan opened his devil wings and instantly arrived in front of that zombie. Boom! The terrifying golden sword intention struck horizontally as if to puncture the world itself, and it instantly crashed into its body. The zombie used its hands to block this attack, but the destructive power of golden divinities was so tyrannical that it directly routed the zombie's defense and pierced through its body, destroying all the evil spirits that were occupying its body. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.